Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, and as somebody called me today, your Talmud of Trek, Robert Meyer Burnett, and welcome to the KURLAN NAISKOS, the PICARD Season 3 after show. And of course, this episode, episode 4, was called No-Win Scenario, or as I like to call it, the Field of Dreams episode of Star Trek, because I've watched this episode a total of 5 times. And like the movie Field of Dreams, it does not matter how many times I see it. At the end of this episode, there's a piece of music that rises, and I tear up every time. And I don't know why. I mean, it's a slow build. It's the emotional power of this episode. I think this is easily the finest episode of Star Trek, certainly since 2017. It was co-written by showrunner Terry Matalas. It was directed by Jonathan Frakes. And it's a tour de force of acting and writing and emotion and Star Trek. And of course, with me, my compatriot on this journey for the 3rd time, Mr. Bill Hunt from the Digital Bits. You know him, you love him. He is the Wall Street Journal of physical media. He's the New York Times. He's the paper of record of physical media. He's written a book on physical media, and Bill has embarked on a new career as a science fiction author. He hasn't just written one book. He's finishing up a 2nd book in the same series, the Space Guard series. I've actually read what would now be the 2nd book. I haven't read the prequel, which is going to be the 1st book. I don't know, but it's fantastic. Of course, my dog's here to bark outside. So, Bill, welcome. Before we bring on our esteemed guest, who's on a radio interview right now, let me ask you this. Like I said in my introductory remarks, I think this is one of the great episodes of Star Trek, really of all time.
Yeah.
And again, I think I've noticed, you know, a lot of people, I've been singing the praises of this episode for a long time, this series for a long time, and a lot of people are coming around, but I think this is the end of Act 1 of the story that is being told. And I have to say that I think it brings everything together in a just a rousing, it's an adventure yarn, it's an emotional tale, it's filled with intrigue, it's got a conspiracy element, it's got everything. And I wanted to ask you, not to color your point of view, but if you could tell us, what did you think of this episode?
I like you. I think this is one of the best episodes of Star Trek in a very, very long time. And this is the episode of Picard season 3 that really clinched it for me. When I was watching, the whole time I'm thinking, this really feels like Star Trek, the Star Trek we grew up with. But you're always wondering if it's going to take a left turn, if it's going to be a bait and switch. And this episode, more than any other, was the one that really got me. And obviously we can talk spoilers now because people will have seen this episode. The flourish at the end with the alien life forms as they escape from the nebula, which turns out to be like a womb of some kind of massive astronomical scale creature. It just, and as you said, when the music swells, it's that moment that, they kind of telegraph this. There are little hints early on, like these energy pulses are, bioelectric. They talk about it in the last couple of episodes, and Crusher starts to hint at what this might be. But you get so wrapped up in the character drama, and there's a lot of character drama, a lot of really good character stuff in this episode, and the action, and the scheme by which they have to find a way to escape this phenomenon. You get so wrapped up in that you forget about the nebula being, that it could possibly be a life form, and then it just hits you all at once. And as you said, the music swells, and it's that flourish at the end of the episode is such a purely Star Trek thing. It's a thing that I have, a moment of wonder, right, that I haven't seen in Star Trek in about 20 years. And when it happens, it's just like, it's like, this is the Star Trek that I know and love. Star Trek always had this power to do this. And we just haven't seen it very much in the last 20 years. And so when it happens, it's a big deal, man. I got emotional watching this.
dude.
And then you add the character payoffs in addition to this, and it's like, wow, it's a great episode.
It really is. I mean, it's a great episode of television. It's a great episode of Star Trek. You know, I really feel that, and it's in stark contrast. For the first time, we literally have Star Wars and Star Trek going head to head, back to back, within 24 hours. And I have to say, the difference there is a wide gulf between The Mandalorian and something like Star Trek Picard Season 3. And I, for one, never thought that I would be as taken with something. And I have to tell you, you know, it's everything that works together. If you think, like,
Yes.
I love the fact that it's Dr. Crusher who's charting these energy bursts, and she, of course, as she should, figure it out. You know, and by the way, Gates McFadden has never been. I've always loved Gates McFadden. When I interviewed her back 10 years ago, we were doing the Blu-rays. I loved her. She was always so nice and so personable to me. Yeah. She's never been better. You know, I've always felt.
As you said, every one of these characters, she makes a massive contribution this episode. By the way, it's her son who realizes we can harness this phenomenon to charge up the warp nacelles and charge up the warp core, and then everybody comes together, and Riker kind of has to be convinced, but Beverly reminds her, said, what would Deanna say?
Oh, what a great moment for her.
Right.
And then, of course, you know, Riker, he walks onto the bridge, thinks about it, turns around and goes, you know, if we could open up the nacelles, and it's Riker. And then when our esteemed guest, Mr. Todd Stashwick, joins us, he's on a radio interview right now, but he'll be with us shortly.
Yeah.
Even he gets
a little bit of espionage.
The changeling. And I have to say, a mad shout out. I love the bridge crew. Yeah. I love this bridge crew, and the fact that Frakes directed this episode. There's great cutaways, and you really, it's done sparingly, but I love all these people.
Well,
I love their faces. I love the way they speak. I love, you know, there's something to be said for the way people, you know, the way people look. And everybody has an interesting look to them. And you know immediately when you cut to them where their station is on the bridge, who and what they are, and they all get. There's that one. It's early on in the episode where Riker's talking to all the crew, the bridge crew. He knows the name of the navigator. He knows his name, like he's addressing them by name, and everybody gets their time. Like here's a captain,
and he's asking their opinion, and they're all making their contribution, providing valuable information. And I love, as they're escaping the nebula, I love the moment where they're riding the wave, they're riding the energy pole, and all of a sudden, LaForge and the navigator start. They all those bridge crew characters start chattering, right? Kind of
overlapping Robert Altman overlapping dialogue.
Yeah, and they're professionals doing their jobs, and I love seeing that. And nobody's showing everybody bragging and showing everybody else how great they are and signaling how awesome they are. They're just quietly doing their jobs in a difficult moment and rising to the challenge.
Banter or jokes being made, or
right.
I mean, the verisimilitude of what I'm watching. I believe this show, as opposed to Star Trek Discovery, where I've never believed a moment of that show.
Yeah,
and
you believe that this is a professional starship crew.
Yes. Doing
their jobs, be very capably doing their jobs. And it's great. And, you know, the interesting thing, and we can talk with Todd when he comes on later, it's, you know, obviously Shaw's career in Starfleet started off in a very, very traumatic way, right? In one of the most traumatic moments we've seen in Star Trek history. And then it seems very much that he just got very rigid about rules and professionalism and control. And, you know, he's what is this in the last episode or the first episode of the show? He's, you know, like 34 missions he's been involved in, and everything has gone like clockwork. And you know, and the interesting thing is you get the sense that he's never really faced, since Wolf 359, he's never really faced a real serious challenge to the ship and the crew while sitting in the captain's chair until this episode. And I love the way his character, he's obviously, you know, he responds to it, and he has some difficult moments, and it's tough for him, but he finds ways to overcome it. And I love the way he and all the other characters on this show rise to that challenge, right? They all rise to meet the challenge and work together. And man, that's so cool to see.
Well, I totally agree. And you know what I really liked about how all of these different stories, Next Generation always had an A and a B story, and sometimes it had a C story. In this, it's one story from different perspectives, different points of view.
Yeah.
And I just the journey that they take Jack Crusher and Jean-Luc Picard on in this episode was so meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations that they have were so great. And the big question, you ask yourself, why did Jack Crusher, Beverly had said, he just didn't want you. He made a choice. He didn't want you in his life. And when you find out he did reach out to Picard, and he heard the answer from the man himself. And dude, when it's that moment on the bridge at the end when they're looking at each other and Picard realizes,
yeah, he did come to see him.
Oh my God.
And by the way, not that long ago, just 5 years earlier, he came, right? And what's great
I'm saying it right now, and I'm getting, it's interesting because my dad was a great guy. I had a great relationship with my father, but there's something about father, son, the same thing at the end of, I say, it's Field of Dreams. Dad, you want to have a catch? I mean, every time and I love Field of Dreams. I love that whole movie, but every single time. And the thing is, this episode creeps up on you from the very beginning when Riker and Picard have that conversation, the pre-title conversation that they have. This is the end, my friend. They've kind of
and
it's
we should talk about that. We'll come back to that because that's an important conversation.
Well, and then
I love it at the end of the last episode, right? A lot of people thought that the way Riker talked to Picard was very, very out of character, and there were people who were kind of like upset by that. But what you find out in this episode is there are reasons for this, right? Riker is still dealing with the trauma of having lost a son, and he's fearing mortality. He's fearing his death. And
he says we've been from one side of the galaxy to the other. I'm paraphrasing here, but I have seen nothing to convince me there's anything after this.
Yeah.
He never had Q say, welcome to the afterlife. You're dead or whatever, like in Tapestry.
Right.
And not that that's an indication of that, but it's profound. There's profundity there. And, a lot of people, this is so frustrating. They're like, well, these people seem out of character. And I'm like, what? This is, as Picard even asks Jack, what are you, 23, 24? It's been 23 or 24 years. Everyone says they said, Rob, it was 20. I'm like, look,
people have lived full lives.
Yeah, and when I think 2 decades,
last time we saw them.
Yeah, but when I think 2 decades, I don't go, well, it's been 22 years. I mean, sometimes I do. I'm like, I always say it's been 2 decades, and so there's so many things. By the way, I have to say this before I forget. One of my favorite, and I've never asked Terry this, and I meant to ask Terry this, when Seven of Nine finds the Voss, the container that our changeling goes into,
right?
It's up inside what might be the red alert, where the red alert is.
Right.
And I'm like a throwback when the phaser, in the original series, they're looking for the phaser on overload. I'm like, that's why I love this show. There's just all this stuff in it that, and by the way, that doesn't end. We haven't even hit, people talk about member berries. There's literally a scene, I think it's in episode 6.
It's episode 6.
Where,
I know what you're talking about.
I mean, I just want to sit there and be like, it's so it's just-tastic, let me tell you.
Yeah. What I love is that, there are people who go, these are Easter eggs for the sake of nostalgia. Well, there's certainly a little bit of that, but there's a reason why they go there. There's a reason why they go to this place they go to, and there's a reason why it's relevant what they're seeing, right? It's important, and it actually affects these characters on their journey. Like after this moment, some characters kind of come into their own a little bit, and it's just so lovely. It's just so this whole show, the writing is so smart. I mean, the way all of the various character stories really come together in this episode.
And the writing in terms of all the interplay between the characters, a lot happens in this episode.
Yeah.
And again, maybe it's because I'm getting older, but the emotional the emotions that these characters are dealing with are very real.
Yeah.
They're very real, and they feel very relevant. I mean, there's so many great touches the way, Frank's directing
Oh
This
yeah, he's
episode,
so good.
it
Yeah,
might be one of the best things he's ever directed. But
I
even
think that's true.
even when Riker starts recording his message to Deanna, and
Yeah.
then everything has a setup and a payoff in this episode.
Yes.
The writing,
Yeah.
Metalis, this has got to be his Emmy. He's got to submit this for the Emmys because
This is
then
it's a beautiful piece of work. It
when
really is.
well, at the end, when you have Riker recording this message, he continues on, and then he's actually talking to Deanna. That
Yeah.
got me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and the important thing about that is what he says is, we witnessed, he's got joy in his eyes, like and tears almost in his eyes. He said, we witnessed a kind of birth, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's I'm just reminded that it's a big universe out there, and that there are all kinds of possibilities, and you can tell he's rediscovered his love of all of this, his love of life, his love of wonder, and it's an amazing moment because when you talk to astronauts, this is exactly the experience that a lot of these people have when they go to space, right? Alan Shepard was one of the original Mercury astronauts, the first American in space, and he eventually walked on the moon in Apollo 14. And these guys, he was these were test pilots, right? They were pretty salty and pretty grounded. And he talks about in his memoir how when he got to the moon and he was doing his job, he was checking off the items on the checklist that he had to do, the tasks. And he looked up and saw the Earth, and he just cried. He just started crying, and he talks about how I never thought that would have happened. If anybody had asked me, I'd have laughed at about it. I said that'll never happen. That's not me. But in the moment, he was overcome by the profundity of what he was seeing and the beauty of what he was seeing, and that sense of perspective shift that happens. They call it the observer effect when you see the Earth from space, and when you see when you get a visual representation of your scale in terms of the universe. And that's what Star Trek is all about, that sense of wonder and that sense of exploration. And, it gets back to the T.S. Eliot quote, right, from Little Gidding, which is, the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. That's the very essence of Star Trek. And all of this it's felt like it's been missing for the last 20 years. And to have it all come back and hit home so perfectly in this episode, I'll tell you, this is we talked last week about how you had told me that a little bit about what was coming, and you'd said there was an episode that was made you very emotional when you saw it, and this is it, man. When I saw this episode, this episode is very emotional.
Well, I mean, it's incredibly emotional, and I have to say, it's a counterpoint. William Shatner actually did go to space.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hear what he said, he said that it was death.
Yeah.
I found death there. And watching this particular episode, there is that joy, and it's that joy of exploration. It is that joy of everything that we want out of Star Trek. And
right.
I get totally emotional. I mean, again, 5 times I've seen this episode.
Yeah.
And I've had this incredible, I literally tear up. Like, it was so embarrassing because I watched it this morning with Elizabeth. I watched it last night at midnight. I watch it with Elizabeth, and I'm literally sitting next to her watching this, and I got to get in the shower and go to work. Dude, tears were streaming down my face. And I got to give a shout out to Stephen Barton, the composer. And I even said to him, because you hear a new theme, that it's his family theme that you first hear at the end of this episode. I even wrote to him on Twitter. I'm like, fuck you, dude. I cry every single time I write this. And you know who else?
It's not just sentimentality. It's earned. The moment is earned for all these characters. It's so great.
We have Mr. Todd Stashwick, Captain Liam Shaw himself. A man, I don't think if there's ever... When I was a kid, growing up in Seattle, they would have races. There was like the drag races, and they would be like, and the fastest woman alive, Shirley Cha-Cha Muldowney. Well, and she was fast. I can't
wait to see where this is going.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think that any actor or character has endeared themselves to the Star Trek fan base faster than Liam Shaw, than Todd Stashwick. I mean, Todd, you came on the show once before, and I have to tell you, I mean, talk about an MVP of this episode. you literally saved the ship with your bare hands in this episode. And I mean, I've got to say, now that we can talk about at least the first 4 episodes.
Mhm.
First of all, welcome to the show. Welcome to
Thank you.
episode 4 of the show.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, how you doing, Todd?
Living the dream.
Well, I mean,
it's loving what I'm seeing with this show so far. That's for sure.
well, Todd, I have to ask you. When we talked about to talk to Terry, and I've watched you now. You've talked to Will Wheaton. I watched your appearance, which I recommend everybody watch. I thought you and Will Wheaton had actually one of the best conversations he's ever had with an actor on the show. I thought you guys did a great job, and I eagerly awaited every Instagram post from the Trek cruise that you were posting. I don't think anybody had more fun than you did. But what is it like for you? I mean, you've been an actor for your whole life. I mean, you started in comedy and improv in Chicago, because you really are a dipshit from Chicago.
Very much.
Was that in the script?
Yes, Terry, that was written in. I remember, at home when they email you the drafts, and I got to that line, and it just warmed my heart. It made me chuckle, because it's just easy to relate to. My dad was, I think I said this on Ready Room. My dad was a mechanic. Like he fixed machines for a living. He was the guy with his name over the pocket, first up, last home, blue collar, fixed cars and fixed machines at a hearing aid factory, ironically, and my mother is deaf in one ear. This is the wildest world. So I completely got it. I got the vibe of who this guy is. And, I've often described my father this way, and I describe Liam this way, as there's a blue collar grace to him. There's a no nonsense grace to him. He suffers no fools. And so, it's easy for me to play a dipshit from Chicago. It's because I'm not playing it. I'm just kind of stepping out of the way and letting parts of who I am just be there.
What's great? One of the things that really struck me about it is that we've never really seen a captain like this in Star Trek. We've never seen a captain who we met so quickly, and immediately feels so grounded. I mean, and one of the things I love about one of the great character introductions in Star Trek. I mean, the moment where he's working the cutlery, and he's just like,
Kentucky Mash, Bebop. I'm gonna memorize that quote. Yeah, freewheeling.
Right, and by the way, the dinner in the captain's mess, right, is a big nautical thing. It's a tradition, and it's like the character immediately, the moment we meet him, he feels like a very real, very grounded guy, and very different from any other captain we've ever seen before. Yet every bit as professional, even though he's obviously he's rude. He's rude, but obviously for a reason, as we find out, right?
I have to give props to all of the writers, first and foremost, and a good deal of them wrote on 12 Monkeys. Sean Tretta and Chris Monfett and Terry Matalas, obviously. You have a prehensile tail moving about your
that's
room.
Cat Charlie here.
I hope so. So I had the benefit that not a lot of actors do, where in that sort of rare providence that a role was created for me that I actually got, and that they were crafting the words and the attitude and the character with me in mind, kind of from early inception. I don't know from the jump, but early enough that Terry was calling him Captain Stashwick in the writer's room before they had named him. And so by the time the scripts got to me, it was very much a hand in glove experience as an actor to, I'm looking at you down here, and it's just pulling my whole eyeline down. Make eye contact, Stashwick. And so the experience was very hand in glove the minute that I started speaking the words, and that's a rare thing where I didn't have to find my way into this guy. I just it was a suit that was tailored for me before I got there, and that is not something that happens a lot, and certainly not something that happens on your first at bat with a role. Often you audition for a part, you get the part, you start playing the part. If the part goes beyond a season, then the writers start going, "Oh, okay, I kind of know the voice of this actor, and let's tailor the writing to suit. It might have been different than what we imagined originally, but let's tailor the writing to what the actor is bringing to the table," which is, I think, what happened with Deacon on 12 Monkeys. After they got to know me, they started going, "Oh, okay, we see how Stashwick will play with this." With Shaw, it was the exact opposite. They were already writing to whatever dipshit nonsense I'm capable of, and whatever my particular spin on things, that was there from the jump in the scripts.
That's
How?
amazing. Well, and there are
Oh,
very specific moments as well. The moment when Seven comes to Shaw's quarters, and Shaw's in there with his cast, and he's just sharpening his knife. It's like
Well,
that is such a specific little
well,
thing.
it's also a nod to 12 Monkeys. When you
Yeah.
meet Deacon in 12 Monkeys, he's sharpening a knife. When
yeah.
you meet Shaw, he's cutting meat. Like Terry likes putting cutlery in my hands, or swelling my eyes shut, which he did a lot in 12 Monkeys. I would get to pages and Deacon's eyes swollen shut. Um, but that scene again is you could I hear the Terry and the Sean and the Monfette often of stuff, and maybe they didn't write it, but and the other writers certainly were on board with writing to the voice of this guy. But like Bang Up Job, Love the View, like those are very like Todd-ish. I'm basically spending my entire life trying to become Bill Murray. That's it.
Well, I was going to ask you. You know, there is sort of it might be acerbic, but there is a wit and a humor that you're
He's very
bringing
wry.
to this. Yeah, it's
And
very wry.
and he's aware of it. It's not even just circumstantial. I mean, the character is a funny guy.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
well, the
And
dialogue's
humor, I would
terrific.
imagine, is a way of reasserting control, right? After all the shit that he's had to deal with.
It's also how he relieves stress, how he attacks as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it is his, he wields it as his sharp tongue as a weapon. I think it is his way of dealing with much of the absurdity of a lot of situations, like a lot of us, which is why I think, back to what Rob was saying, I think people really connect with him because he's almost a Greek chorus. Like when he says, "Well, that's fun. Any other weird shit you want to throw at me?" Like,
Right.
that's such a, like, yeah, that's a moment when you're in the final frontier being, and we get to it at the end in this sort of wonderful awe of seek out new life.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's some stuff, if you take like the oil slick monster in,
Skin of Evil,
that kills Tasha Yar,
Armis.
that's some weird shit. Like, you would have to go, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like sentient pudding. What is this? And so Shaw is the guy that gets to say that stuff.
Well, I was going to ask you. I think obviously people have talked a lot about, and you talked about this with Will Wheaton about the Robert Shaw Indianapolis speech, and there's a lot of people that are talking about how we're seeing things that we've seen before in Star Trek repeated, and like obviously Ben Sisko talking about what happened to him on the Saratoga, but we've only ever heard it once. And as you bring up, and I love how it's written and how you talk about you were a grease monkey working in engineering, and the fact that somebody just randomly picked you, and you were lucky. You might not have been picked. You could have been the guy next to you who didn't get picked.
Yeah.
And the whole idea that Shaw has these unresolved issues of PTSD,
survivor guilt,
and the way you play it, what I loved about your performance is you let it bubble up. I mean, when you're pointing, but you never go over the top. It was a beautifully measured performance, and I was wondering, did you practice that at home? And did you how did you prep to do that? Because you must have known that this is a moment that not many actors get on an episodic show.
Well, several things. First of all, you play the scene you're given. You play the relationships in the room, right? You can't play the importance of the legacy of where this sits in the, like you can be meta aware of, wow, this really connects to some vital things in this character's past and in the legacy of TNG. But that's like nerd Todd thinking about it. As an actor, I was lucky that there is Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and Part 2.
Right.
So that I can watch those and watch what's happening in space and go, that's what I saw at my portal. And just like Cisco, when he's flying away and he sees the ship explode. Like, so as an actor, what a lucky thing that I got to have his backstory visualized for him already. And then I got to go, all right, now what did it feel like when I was running around the halls of my ship at 20 some years old for my life, fearing for the lives of my comrades? So those are the questions that then you start asking yourself in your preparation to answer your question. It was a lot of visualization. So for me, I had to kind of recreate that day for Shaw in my head and imagine what thoughts were going through his head as he's, fighting for his life and fearing for the life of his comrades. And what was it like to go to the bay, at the shuttle bay? What was it like to sit there as your heart is in your throat? And I got to have those thoughts, and then emotions will follow thoughts. They just do. And if you think of those fearful thoughts, then you suddenly start reliving an experience, just like all of us.
So I got to ask you, here you are being directed by Jonathan Frakes, who clearly is having the time of his life and delivering a performance, maybe the best performance we've ever seen, William Riker. It's so amazing. But the geek in me and the filmmaker in me is watching you deliver the scene, and he's directing you. And he was there fighting the Battle of Wharf 359. I was having sort of this geek Trek fan industry professional overload thing going on in my head. I'm like, did you ever stop and go, Jonathan, what were you thinking during the Battle of Wharf 359?
Peel the onion, right? Peel the nerdy onion. No. In answer to your question, no, because it's a thing, and I am not a method guy. I am able to, sort of let things go at cut. But when scenes have to live sort of in this kind of tightrope of an emotional space, I will, on that day, in that moment, separate myself, maybe listen to music to kind of shed any distractions so that I can focus on Patrick and Ed and the job at hand, and so that I can have those visualizations, so that I can have those thoughts, so that I can go back to that day that I imaginarily went through, so that I can hopefully bring authenticity and a truth and an honesty to that moment as he's going back through it. And then so what Jonathan's doing is Jonathan is like at a mixing board as a director going, all right, you know what, get real hot on that moment. Let's see if you did that restrained. We want you to get real hot on that moment, or you got too hot on that moment. Pull it back. So he is there directing. He's kind of conducting the instrument. I will say he would always let me go back to one, so that it wasn't like pick it up in the middle of that thing, so that I didn't ever have to get lost and lose my place in the story. he always would just reset me and go, all right, as we get back to when you get to this place in the story, let it get a little hotter than you may want, than maybe Shaw would want it to, which is his emotions getting the best of him. Or don't let it get hot, hold that in as a pressure cooker. So he was there, like I said, flipping the levers and sort of just kind of guiding things, because he's hearing it and he's seeing it. He's outside of me going, all right, here's the colors I want to paint with. But again, to his credit, he would just let me do the whole thing from the top every time, which then let me play within it as we went.
Well, you're getting a lot of choices. You're giving him a lot of choices. The editors, a lot of the showrunners, Terry, a lot of choices.
What's so fascinating about that too is that when we pick up Shaw in this series, he's a professional captain who's been serving for X number of years, and we find out in the first episode he's led the Titan on 20 or 30 missions, right? That have all gone without a hitch.
35, I believe.
Yeah. And so he's
I don't think they've gone without a hitch. I mean, I'm sure he's seen there are awards in that ready room.
Right.
He's seen his share of scuffles, but he doesn't ever take unnecessary risks as far as he's concerned.
Right. And he's probably never faced, right? I mean, it's really interesting. I think about, athletes who become professional baseball players or professional football players, and they win the Super Bowl like the very first season, right? It's kind of the reverse of what happened to Shaw. He's a young officer, and he experiences the worst thing he can possibly experience, and then he rebuilds his career and goes on with distinction. But he's probably never faced. The episode is called No Win Scenario. It's essentially the Kobayashi Maru for everybody, right? Yeah, and he's probably never really faced that scenario.
Not that level. And I will also say, and the big thing in this equation is he probably never thought he'd be face to face with locutors.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is triggering beyond
and on top of that, he's got a first officer who was also aboard, right?
Yeah, and that's a curious thing too, right? Like in my own headcanon, because we never really talked about it officially, he chose 7, and it could be for many reasons. It could be other than she is really good, and I talked about this on the Ready Room. She's really good at what she does, and she is that more impulsive, reckless, outside of the box voice that he needs on his bridge, that he's not doing himself, but he will consider it. If you watch the episodes, she offers situations and he does consider it, and he does take her advice. And I think that's necessary. Also, not for nothing, I think he is trying to control his Borg fear. And by taking her on as a first officer and also dead naming her, which is a terrible thing, he is trying to control something that he didn't have control over. Like the Borg destroyed his life. Not that he's going to destroy a Borg's life, but I think he's trying to go, if I can tame this thing that is huge and on fire in my soul and find a way to make good out of it by having a great first officer, and I will just be blind to her gadgetry. I think it's therapy on some level. I think it's also the dark version is he's trying to control it. Like the Borg controlled his destiny, I'm going to control the Borg. I think it's a lot of things, and I think it's none of it is right on the surface other than the dead naming, which again, he's a broken man with a lot to learn. When people were not happy online, and justifiably, that he dead names her, and it's for a reason. He's a broken man. He's in the wrong.
He takes control of it, right? I mean, and he's trying to take control of it, and that's what's so great about this character is that all of that stuff, you feel that from almost the first moment you see him. It's there. The character is so well-rounded from the very get-go, which allows you then to take him to a really to a different place over the course of the season, right?
Truth.
Which obviously we can't talk about very much, but
I mean,
it lets you play a full arc.
He has an arc, and he. That's why it's so funny when just people give him one episode. We hate him. like off a first episode. Okay, great. If that's the game we're playing, like there's a, you know, but it's also fun to pick sides. Like this is what we do as fans. We love to build our ships and our camps, and I am team this, and I get all of that. It's part of the nerd culture that we live in, the hashtag of it all. And so I think and if anybody knows any
my viewing list, so I would catch up with it and watch it, but it wasn't something I was paying much attention to. And now I'm going in, no offense if Terry's watching the show, but now I've been going through and watching the discs, the Via Vision, the big box set that came out in Australia. It's the Australian. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And the show's really, really good. I mean, it's really well constructed. You're terrific in it. And it's interesting because Terry's a really humble guy. But one of the things that I've learned about him is all of these things, everything that's going on is very much thought through. Nothing is left to chance, and the detail and the amount of thought that he and the rest of the writing staff have put into this show is quite extraordinary. But
I mean, he has a tremendous eye for putting together an amazing writing room that all balance each other's voices, and then he is the the maestro. Like, okay, now I need to blend all of this into a flow. Well, the fascinating thing about 12 Monkeys, and I apologize for interrupting you, is it's a Trek show.
Yeah, it totally
is a Trek show. She's a captain. Jones is the captain. The bridge is the time travel room. There is a ready room. There are missions, and instead of planets with the away team, you're just going to timeline.
I need to see this. I need to see this series.
Dude.
Oh, you love it.
I
can't wait.
And again, like in Terry Matalas fashion, just like with Picard, I rarely see anybody stick series finale endings the way Terry and team can.
Oh, that's so good.
It's funny. I'm actually really looking forward to, because I did watch the original ending, but now that I'm like deeply immersed in it, I mean the box set comes with the map, and it's just so
the word of the witness.
The word.
Right there.
By the way, I didn't even notice this, but mad props to you for having a Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I'm a huge fan of that movie, and I mean, you're a dyed-in-the-wool John Cameron Mitchell. I've met him before. I mean, yeah, this whole thing is like the greatest thing ever. I love this so much. I mean, you're, as we say or as Todd Browning would have us say, one of us, one of us, one of us. Now, I should ask you this too, though. When you were delivering your tour de force speech and you're acting opposite Patrick Stewart, and maybe I shouldn't ask this, but was he off camera when the close up was he there for your close up?
He was there for all of it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Now, what was his?
As was Ed.
Now, were you? I mean, first of all, can we just talk about Ed Speleers? I mean, again, the two of you guys. It's really hard to make brand new Star Trek characters, especially that are coming in with legacy characters. Like, I can't imagine from an acting standpoint, you had to have gotten maybe a little bit nervous, but you and Ed Speleers are just in this episode crushing.
I'm not trying to inflate anything about myself. What I will say is the writing supported me so much that I just had to do my job and get out of its way and just do the page. So, and also having met Patrick, by the time I got to that scene, I'd already been working on 3 other episodes with him. And he is immediately welcomed me. I mean, I've told this story about how when I was sitting there with him in the captain's chair, and I love stories, and he's got a million of them. And so just sharing stories, and Brent Spiner comes over and kind of starts horsing around. I'd never met Brent. I take that back. I drunkenly met him on an aircraft carrier at Comic-Con, and I have a picture of it. At any rate, like in 2012 or something like that. It was Comic-Con and Shatner was there.
Yeah, Shatner flew in.
LeVar was there, yeah. And I was drunk on an aircraft carrier, and I asked for a picture with Spiner. So and Spiner comes over, he starts horsing around with Patrick, and Patrick stands up and he goes, "Oh, have you met Todd Stashwick? Uh, he's one of us." And like he just took me into the fold as part of the crew of this show. So that, and then it was also after the dinner scene, and you would get like the little thumbs up from him across the table, like you're crushing it, and you take that in humbly and feel amazing. And then after the monologue scene, he got out of his chair, he walked over and put his arm on my hand, or put his hand on my arm. It's like, effing great. It was like, oh, okay, that's awesome, awesome. I censored myself. He used the F-bomb.
He did in this episode too, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what he said to me. And then the next day he came up to me, and again, I'm humble bragging here, but he's like, I was telling my wife about your scene last night, and oh, it was just so many choices and just such wonderful things. And then at the premiere, he was so tickled that everybody got all the jokes. He's like they laugh, we got everything.
The remarkable thing about all of this, you were talking about the writing a minute ago, is I hear from Rob how fast this came together, because obviously Terry is working as co-producer on season 2. They shot these 2 seasons essentially back to back. So I keep asking Rob, when the hell did Terry have time to write all this?
Well,
when did they come up with this stuff?
They had to do it quickly.
He also didn't sit there alone at a typewriter. I mean, he assembles a great team.
Yeah.
And what Terry has is impeccable taste.
Yeah, he really does.
Like he knows what the shot needs to look at. He knows what to cut, what to leave in. He knows, and he has impeccable taste in picking writers. He has impeccable taste in casting. Like he has, Ed Spaliers is a great example. Amanda Plummer is a great example. Like, look at my bridge. Each one of them get a little moment, but they're all wonderful.
Oh, we were talking about that earlier. The bridge crew is just phenomenal. All of those actors are, even though they're, they don't have a lot of screen time, but they're so memorable, and their faces are so great, and they're all really good actors. I really love those actors. All the actors on the bridge.
Tavine, I've known for years. She was in my improv school.
Oh my God, wow. What a great face she has too.
And she just has just enough Spock.
So good. I mean,
it's so good.
You see these characters. I mean, it's great because even when they're not speaking, you see them emoting. They're in the moment, and it's a meaningful moment, right? And when when they're working, you hear the chatter where they're talking about adjusting the course, and it's like
good.
They're just being quietly professional, and it's making a contribution. It's so satisfying.
They're so good.
So now, did you and Spaliers, did you guys ever sit down and have a conversation about what it's like to join this? Star Trek is going to be 57 years old, the franchise, this year, and the two of you
years older than me.
I'm older than me too. Did you guys ever have a conversation about what it was like to join this family, to be a part of this legacy?
You know what? I think we both had that, like, isn't this awesome moments in the makeup trailer or at lunch, or because Michelle and they would go up to they'd be like, "Are you ready? Are you ready? Buckle up, because you're about to be launched into a thing that's so much bigger than y'all, and you are going to get pulled along for the ride now for the rest of your lives." And you don't know what that means until you know what it means. Yeah. But Ed and I both would have this moment of like, we don't know what we don't know, but it's exciting.
Well, as a fan of genre content too, you've been on the other side of that equation, right?
Yeah.
You've been on the other side of it, so you know the meaning.
Well, you've been. I mean, he was in Enterprise, and one of the great 3-episode arcs. I mean, in terms of what Enterprise did, that Vulcan arc was one of the great.
Yeah, but I never was sort of met by the fandom.
Right.
That.
Well, what was it like for you going? I mean, the Trek cruise. You look like you were having a great time. I mean, that was almost like a cotillion, or a coming out.
Well, like as
you were like it was your debutante ball.
and it was last minute. Like I found out Wednesday I was going, and I was on the boat Friday,
Wow.
Wow.
because John Billingsley canceled, and so they're like, Stashwick, can you jump on the boat? And I'm like, absolutely, ship, gotta call it a ship.
Right.
Can you jump on the ship? And I was like, yeah, I literally didn't have anything that week, and I'm like, I'll go to Mexico and nerd out with people about this job that I loved. That sounds like a great way to spend a week with Frakes and with Tawny Newsom and just Picardo and Ethan Phillips and like just Nana Visitor, like just a great group of people. So I saw no downside, and they'll pay me. So it was like paid to go to Mexico and nerd out. So my wife said, she's like, "What was that like?" And I'm like, as a nerd, I can say it's like they took Caesar's palace, filled it with nerds, and threw it in the ocean. Like it was the coolest thing. I'm like, I've never done that, but I've been to many cons as a lover of genre entertainment, and so I have an appreciation for it as a fanboy. I've never been to a Star Trek con specifically, but as a fanboy, I have an appreciation for how these things are meeting grounds and gathering places for people that don't see each other any other time of the year, except when they gather underneath the banner of their fandom.
Yeah.
And then really humbled at how quickly, 2 episodes in, by the time I hit the ship, how people responded and embraced shock. Like it was one, and then all the memes that started that week, and all of that. No,
the never-ending no memes, and you got the double no this episode. No,
yeah, I did,
no.
yeah. You know, what's funny is the other I'm very famous. I'm not famous, but a very famous gift that came out of Supernatural is me as Dracula saying no. So there are 2 now gifts of me from nerd franchises of saying no. I'm like, I'm the king. I'm Dr. No. But
So what is your?
yeah, it was fun.
What is your first fandom? What was your first fandom? The first thing you first discovered that really got you into?
I am not kissing your asses right now, but it was the Mego, Kirk, Spock, and so 1974, 6 years old, when I was just sort of like figuring stuff out. My cousin gave me Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and the Enterprise playset.
The bridge.
Yeah,
With a spinning transporter,
And your
No,
tree ornament. Your Enterprise
yeah,
tree ornament up there.
and these bad boys here.
Well,
yeah.
and they were all kind
Planet
of
of the Apes.
I mean, they were all kind of the same thing, because Mego went
Yeah.
after, you had the animated Planet of the Apes series, and you had the animated Star Trek series basically running concurrently. Well, 73, 74. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it was,
it was.
so now I have to ask you from an acting standpoint. Obviously, what I love about what Terry did was he's basically made an epic bottle show, because, in order to save money, you're shooting on standing sets, and both the Next Generation and the original Star Trek series, they would do like the Doomsday Machine from the original series. It was one of the great bottle shows of all time, because you do a redress, add some debris, and you have a second starship being destroyed. But this, in order to work on standing sets, I mean, the way that the 10 Forward set is used as both a real place and a holodeck recreation. I mean, from a producing standpoint and a writing standpoint, this is a genius. I mean, one of the things about Discovery was how much it cost. And Les Moonves and all the people at CBS, when they first realized the sticker shock, Brian Fuller told me that Les Moonves said to him, "Well, can't you just make it for like $1 million an episode?" Because they didn't understand that a Star Trek show is very expensive, because you have to build everything. Nothing is off. You can't, I mean, even though
You can't go to a location.
No.
Yeah.
And the idea that the writing staff, and I've actually never asked Terry about this, but it's a ship-based, he's told me that he wanted to bring Star Trek back to its ship-based roots, but it's a genius. What they've done is so genius from a production standpoint, and from a producing a show where you make such good use of your standing sets. You're 4 episodes in, and you've got the 10 forward set you inherited from season 2. You've got a redress of the Lost Arena and the Stargazer, and the Lost Arena has stood in now, well, for itself, and then also Vadic's ship. And it's, from a production standpoint, it's pretty great. But for you, you get quarters, you get corridors, you get every Star Trek fan's dream. You get to plan turbo lifts, engineering. I mean, and you get to say warp nacelle. You know, I was like, is it nacelles? Or when I was a kid, I'm like, nacelles, what is that? I mean, you actually did something we've never seen before, which is open up the nacelles. Now I want hotwired the nacelles. So what is it like for you in terms of acting on these kinds of sets? Because they're really beautiful. You know, they really did a great job. And you know, you don't get vistas. You're on a set, you know, and getting in character, is it what's it like? What's it like for you both as a nerd and as an actor to be on these sets that are iconic all the way back to, you know, you've been watching this since you were a kid.
Incredibly dull. No, it was, the funny thing is, again, on 12 Monkeys, very similar. Like it was corridors and piping and a large room with a lot of sci-fi equipment in it, and then a ready room. So I had that experience of like being in a soundstage with your sci-fi set. So that wasn't foreign. What was awesome was this time there was a captain's chair. So, like, come on, that was you know, I use this phrase a lot, and it's the only way to describe it. It was never lost on me. It was never lost on me, this legacy that I am putting my pushpin in the timeline of, my thumbprint. It was never lost on me. I was humbled and excited and grateful and honored and all of the adjectives. So it was, and then just cool, like it makes it easy to be yelling battle stations when I'm looking at my view screen and I see my helmsman there, and I look over at science and I look over at communications, and like everything is where it's supposed to be. As a Starfleet captain, I stand in that bully pulpit and look around, and boom, 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 and it's all there. And it's a theatrical space that they built. It literally feels like a little cyclorama. And then the turbo lift was awesome. There's the and then when it opens up and there's your bridge for you with all of the people at their post. It's all those things that you played as a kid, but it's actually happening in front of you and someone's making a permanent record of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anybody who's ever been on a bridge recreation or a bridge set, it's like it is a thing, man. You walk into that room and it's like, oh my God, it's immersion suddenly, and it's very real in that moment.
It really is. And then you're looking across the table and you're like, I am looking at Jean-Luc Picard on while we are in my ready room, and that it lands with authority. It's still all the same act of pretend, but it makes it easier when the guy you're pretending with is the guy.
Best cosplay ever, right?
Now, how did you get all, like, I've not asked Terry this either. Did you get all the scripts for the season, or were they still writing while you were shooting?
They were still sussing certain details out as we went. I knew that I was going to have, as we call it, the Quinch speech. I knew that was part of his backstory.
Yeah, what I was going to ask is I mean, they knew as Terry said, we knew it was Captain Stashwick, but as they saw your performance inform the character, did they write more to you?
I couldn't tell you because I wasn't in the writer's room, because I would say from the minute I got script 1, it was already written to me.
Yeah,
It already
okay.
felt very much like me. So I don't know if anything else changed from that going forward. I do remember, and I think I said this last time, I do remember kind of doing my spin on it, the sort of the sardonic, beleaguered, over it guy, the first day, and then Terry walking over going, 100% that. Do that all day long. And so it was like, it was like, here's the piece of music, and I'm going to sing it, and apparently I'm singing the notes correctly. So it was very encouraging to be buoyed from the jump. Yeah.
John Suntress, a fellow Chicagoan who is a broadcaster in Chicago, has sent in a tip. He has a word balloon podcast. He says, "Hey guys, way to go, Todd. Captain Shaw is an amazing character I'd love to follow in future stories. Would you ever want to write a Shaw Star Trek novel?"
I would, look, I love any challenge, and I love digging in. I've never penned in this universe.
Because you're a writer yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I did a version before James Gunn took it over. I did a version of Suicide Squad 2 draft with Gavin O'Connor.
Interesting.
I was part of that writing team. I wrote on a Star Wars video game. So I've had the honor of being and I'm currently working on a Captain America Black Panther game for Skydance New Media. I'm co-writing on that.
And you co-wrote a comic book as well, right?
I wrote that one. I wrote on my own, but I created it with an artist named Dennis Calero, who's a fantastic artist. But writing a Star Trek novel, I've never written a novel, but writing a Star Trek novel would be an amazing challenge because it has its own lore and parameters and language and understanding of science in a way that you don't deal with when you're writing for
Andy Robinson, who plays Garrick on Deep Space Nine, he wrote a Star Trek novel called A Stitch in Time.
That's fun.
And it's a terrific Star Trek novel. So there's precedent for it.
I certainly would love the challenge. I certainly would not, I don't think I would go it solo. I would certainly want the science advisor and somebody who speaks Trek.
Well, Terry's friend, WGA president, and who won a WGA award, David Goodman, wrote the autobiography of Captain Kirk. You guys should write the autobiography of Liam Shaw.
Well, there you go.
Come on,
Done.
You and David Goodman.
Done.
Come on, dude. That's what I'm talking about.
It would definitely be great to see more of this character in
I love him.
Star Trek universe, man.
What like the way I see it is, Jerry was sharing a story with me about when she booked Voyager, they gave her a T-shirt that had the Delta on it with bars, and it said "Lifer." And so the way I see it, once you're in. You are part of this. If all I got to do is season 3 of Picard, my soul is complete. Anything after this would be just cake, an amazing cake. Anything beyond this experience, I could live off the joy and honey of having done season 3 of Picard, but if there's more to do, I'm up for it.
I gotta be honest, that's kind of how I feel as a viewer and a longtime Star Trek fan as well, right? It's this season of Picard is a little bit of a miracle. It's like the 8th season of Star Trek: The Next Generation that we didn't get, or the next couple of feature films with that cast that we never got.
It's special.
And I hope there's more.
You could tell that. Wow. You could tell that on set.
Yeah,
you could tell that on the vibe on set. You could tell that in the scripts. You could tell that there was a little tiger by the tail. You could feel that. We also felt that in 12 Monkeys too. And obviously there's a common denominator, and that's Terry and the 12 Monkeys folks that were, the Munfet, the Tretta, like the folks that were brought along for the ride.
And also Stephen Barton, the composer.
Stephen Barton.
I mean, like I said to him, I tweeted him like, "Fuck you, you make me cry." His quote unquote family theme. And it's really funny. I had never met him before, and Terry,
Mhm.
when I first started watching the show, the music sort of changed because it wasn't all done yet, and his score, and even Steven, I got to meet him at the premiere at the Chinese. And first of all, what a delightful guy, him and his kid and his wife, nicest people in the world.
Yeah.
But even he said, I co-composed this score with Terry. Like Terry sat with me, and I think what's really interesting, and Terry hates it when I'm not going to disparage anybody. What I want to say though is when you are working on an IP, what the franchise owners want is a producer and a creative like Terry who knows the franchise, and brings all the creatives that they need in to plus whatever they're doing. Because the franchise, if you have a long legacy, but a guy like Stephen Barton is, he's touching on Goldsmith, and he's touching on even Dennis McCarthy, and he's touching on all the composers.
Building with the bricks of what make Trek, and that makes a lot of sense.
And then whether it's Cliff Idleman with Star Trek VI, but then he's also adding the Titan theme. What a great theme that is! I mean, and that family
the soundtrack
theme
for the season is going to sell so many copies when they release it.
Terry's told me they're releasing like some special edition vinyl, which I will, I'll want to get. Justin Toner writes in and says, our own Justin Toner says, I want to thank Todd for breathing life into such a great three-dimensional Trek character. The speech about what happened to him at Wolf 359 and his anger at Picard was fantastic acting. Bravo. There's a great parallel between Sisko and Shaw, both traumatized and damaged by Wolf 359, but while Sisko's journey on DS9 allowed him to move past it, Shaw has not been able to do that yet. I can't wait to see where his character journey goes next. It's interesting because in the next episode, in episode 5, I don't want to ruin anything, but I mean, obviously the mission has been accomplished. Beverly has been rescued, and maybe there's a little bit of, you get to maybe wipe your hands clean of these people. Maybe. And
you're adorable.
I just love how he keeps rolling with the character. I mean, not any spoilers at all, but I love how the character of Shaw just keeps kind of rolling with it. He just keeps kind of rolling with it all throughout the season.
He also just because we have this wonderful cathartic episode today, and this beautiful ending, which is so even reminiscent of the motion picture. Like
such a classic Star Trek flourish, right?
I love it. And when Beverly says, "Just seek out new life," like just goosebumps thinking about it. And let's boldly get the hell out of here.
It reminds me of the moment from The Measure of a Man, right?
By the way, I just have to say, Todd, that people are sending in incredible super chats to this channel. You are definitely you're becoming a very lucrative guest, so you have an open. I have to. Heel versus Babyface. My good friend Az, all the way over in the UK, is my favorite Yorkshire man. He and I did a series we reviewed The Prisoner. We did 18 episodes reviewing all 17 Prisoner episodes. He says, Todd, you are stealing the show in Picard. Episode 4 was another incredible episode.
Well, with the wonderful thing, and thank you for that. That's really kind. And again, I can't say anything except that I was super supported by the writing and trusted with something. What's great about, instead of it being a next gen 2-hour movie, is you can have that episode for Shaw because it's a 10-episode show. So then we do get to get Worf has his moment, and Riker had that Riker speech.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get the rest of, this is the reunion season. So the fact that it's 10 episodes gives the breathing room for us to take a moment and investigate this new character from Picard's show, not Next Gen, but this new character from Picard, and give him weight, gravitas, viewer investment in him. Mm-hmm. And then still go, and now on to Geordi, and
Yeah.
now on to
Yeah.
the rest of the gang. Like it's a beautiful thing, and that they allowed room in the story for my character in the way they have.
It's one of the most satisfying things about the season, I think, is that all of the characters you know and love get a moment, but all of these other characters get a moment too, and they all make a contribution, and none of them feel out of place. None of them feel
Agreed.
like they're distracting from any moments you really want with other characters. It's
No.
all of this beautiful, like it's a real ensemble,
It really is.
and it's lovely.
Yeah.
Sylvain Saint Laurent sends in $140 super chat. And he says, Rob, thank you. You're the only reason why I gave a chance to Picard. L'odieux est la porte de sortie des ridicules. That's my best French.
It's pretty good.
And,
That's not bad.
And my lady is a native French speaker. So I'm sure if she's watching right now, she's going to be like, what the hell, dude? But first of all, Sylvain, thank you for supporting the channel in that way. That is very nice of you to do so. Amazing. Julio Scissors says Frakes channeling Shatner with a ship-wide address to the crew, which was fantastic.
And by the way, that moment recalls the speech that Picard tells the cadets, right? What he tells the cadets about it's when you're in that dark moment.
Yep.
You rely on each other, and you can accomplish things you wouldn't have been able to accomplish alone. It's so good.
So amazing. Bradley Burnett sends in $100 super chat and says, I've been a Trek fan since 1980, and I've been waiting for a return to form for so long. I started my own channel to review Picard because RMB said it was good. Thank you, Todd. I first described Shaw as a dick. I stand by it. But now seeing it unfold, amazing. Thank you. I think, that sentiment is, first of all, thank you so much. You guys, you're so generous. I've got to, I owe Todd, I'm going to have to send him a W-9 and make sure that he gets his SAG payment. I just think that it's funny to me because I met Terry because of this. Like I was the first time I ever met Terry Metalis was over Twitter, and he was going, we wanted to give the Next Generation cast a real send off, and I was a dick, and I was like, oh really? You mean All Good Things wasn't enough of a send off? And Terry wrote back to me, well, I really liked your movie Free Enterprise. I'm like, and then I wrote back to him. I said, well, I like 12 Monkeys. Now I like it more going through it. And that's how we developed my love affair with, I mean, I hadn't even met his dogs yet, or his wife or his son.
Luna.
When Luna loved me. And I have to say when, I first saw Terry in the flesh, he was at the John Williams concert with his son, and I just happened to be going through the turnstile at the Hollywood Bowl, and I was like, oh my God, that's Terry Metalis. And he was buying his son merch, and his son already had a t-shirt on from a previous John Williams show.
I might have been there too.
Oh yeah, it was this year.
With our lightsabers.
Oh my God, fantastic. But it's so great to see, I'd always mention, and we were talking about this before, in the third season of Next Generation, Michael Piller came on board, and the second season of TNG had to deal with the 88 writers' strike, and they were trying to figure out a formula. And one of the things that Michael Piller did was he said, instead of our stories coming from an external force, I've decided that I'm going to make all of our stories have to come out of our characters. The characters have to come first, and they'll tie into what our external force is going to be. So it fundamentally changed what the show, or how the stories were told. And I think, in a way, that's kind of what Terry has done for Picard Season 3, what Michael Piller did for TNG, which is sort of really interesting that in the third season, he flipped what was going on, and it's so internal. It's so about character. And as I've gotten older, I've often said that Star Trek has grown with me since I was a kid, watching the original series in the early 70s and the animated series and the motion pictures and Next Generation and DS9 and Voyager and Enterprise. As I grew up, Star Trek always grew with me. And then in 2009, they went back to the beginning, and Discovery was a prequel again, but it wasn't. It was concurrent with The Cage or whatever. But this show, and I think the reason that I've responded so much to it, as somebody who's grown up with Star Trek, the third season of Picard, the season 3, is where I'm at in my own life.
Yeah.
So this episode in particular, just right to the heart, because the things that matter to me now and the way you ruminate about where you're at in your life and what's happened to you, and to see the characters and the performances, and Liam Shaw is a perfect example of this. I mean, you're a starship captain, so you have achieved, as far as the Star Trek universe, sure, there's Commodores and Admirals, but everybody wants to be captain of a starship, but yet you've still got unresolved issues. And to see that kind of thing within the confines of a great Star Trek story is really meaningful, and it really matters. And I finally feel like I've quantified this in my mind. I'm like, wow, Star Trek stopped growing with me in 2009. And this is the first time that I felt that Star Trek has advanced the franchise. Now, this is selfish, but for me in particular, and this episode quantified that in such a beautiful way, and maybe that's why it hits me so hard.
Yeah, I mean, I find I am, you were talking about how you were going after Terry on Twitter at first, and then he said he liked Enterprise, and you said Free Enterprise, and then you were like, I vowed years ago to be a creator, not a critic. And so, especially outward facing, I mean, I have opinions and whatnot. And what I have seen, even as early as today, on Twitter, there is, within the confines of the JJ stuff and Discovery and Strange, there's a Star Trek for a lot of people, and it's making a lot of people happy at where it's meeting them in their life at that time. And so I'm just thrilled for that and that alone. Whether it works for you or if it doesn't work for you, and if it's not quote unquote your Trek or new Trek and all of the stuff, it's somebody's Trek, and it's working, and it's filling their souls. And so I alone am thrilled for that.
No,
what I'd love to see is for Star Trek going forward to keep all of that in mind, right? Like, it ought to be the thing where everybody has their place and everybody can see themselves in it. And
it's a big tent.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's a big tent, and I think fandom is one of those funny things that as the internet has grown and social media and politics, you see this in the real world too. It's everything has gotten so toxic, and it feels to me like, thinking back to when we were all kids, fandom is the thing that united us all, right? Yeah. Like, you had to work to find people who shared your fandom,
and at the same time, it is tribal, and I recognize that in the way that we go. I want to find, especially, I, like you, grew up in the 80s, in the late 70s and 80s. And I was a D&D kid. Like, we literally hid in our basement rolling our math rocks. And so it was something that was huge conversation amongst our friends, but in the greater sense, we were quote unquote nerds, even though Star Wars was the biggest film of all time. When we were coming up, and Raiders, and these were cultural touchstones. But at the same time, there was still a little bit of the whole, to reduce it, the Poindexter of it all. And so what I like now is it is the culture. And when I've sat at tables at Comic-Con and I see some young person dressed as this really obscure character from some anime that means the world to them, and I'm like, you run with that, because these are cynical times, if I can quote Jerry Maguire, and if you find joy, find it where you can. And empathy, I talked about this on the cruise, like stories are empathy machines. They allow us to walk in the shoes of somebody that is not us, that does not have the same experience as us, and we can cry and our heart can break. And the fact that today, and I'm super humbled by this, like beyond, it's hard to even find a way to into it, but I have gotten more than one message from veterans today about the speech in the in 10 Forward about survivor's guilt and PTSD, and the fact that this character reached them. And again, I've said it before, I'm literally a knucklehead from Chicago who was a comedy boy, that I can do something that finds connection to somebody in this cynical times and gives them catharsis. Like, story are empathy machines, and empathy is what will save us. And it's amazing.
Well,
back on a life and say, I brought some joy to people, right?
At the end of the
no matter
day,
how simple it might have been, somebody out there found something I did meaningful. It's like, there's no better thing in the world than that.
And relief and blow off steam and all of the things.
Yeah.
I've been very critical of modern Star Trek, but I've often said to everyone too, at the same time, everybody's Discovery is going to be the first time somebody sees Star Trek and falls in love with it. Picard
and grew up with it,
and grew up with Strange New Worlds, and right now it's really interesting. You've got Prodigy, Lower Decks, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard, and that runs the gamut of all age groups or anybody's interests in the franchise. And I have to remember that. It's like I grew up with the James Bond franchise. I love James Bond, even when the movies are, and there are not, the James Bond franchise, the quality of the franchise is spotty at best. But I love James Bond.
Dressed up as a Japanese man.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problematic stuff. And the one thing about Star Trek that endures more than anything, and especially now, is it shows that humanity has a future. We will have, and whether you like the shows or not, or whatever, it still is a show about human excellence set in a future that is worth hoping for and working towards.
One of the questions that they asked me in an interview on the cruise was, finish the sentence. Star Trek is blank, and I had to finish the sentence. And the sentence, that the only one word came to mind, and that word was family. And because my family introduced me to it, I celebrated it with my uncle and my cousin. Then suddenly got cast on this show, and I am part of that one. The TNG family embraced me in. And then I go on the cruise, and you go, and it is for this family. So whether you are part of the Discovery branch of this family tree or the Prodigy branch of this family tree, original series, it all comes from the same trunk. Yeah. And we all share the same roots, literally and figuratively. And I think that is rare and beautiful.
There's something lovely to be said for the fact that we are all, I assume we're all in probably around our 50s, around the same age. And there's something really lovely at this age to be able to retouch that thing that we loved when we were 10.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I know.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, going back to what you were saying, Rob, like for me, Star Trek was the original series, TNG, and the Nicholas Meyer films. And when I look at season 3 of Picard, it rings all the bells that make my heart sing of what Star Trek means to me. It's like Star Wars as well. Like, are you a Jedi person? Are you an Empire person? Are you a scoundrel person? Like, there's when someone says Star Wars to me, I think of Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon.
So you're a scoundrel guy.
Very much. And someone else thinks of X-Wings and Rogue Squadron and all of that. And it means just as much to them. As the Falcon means to me. And and yet we share the same family tree.
And I remember as a kid, I'm a child of divorce, and I remember we moved around a lot. Every year I was in a new school. But the amazing thing about the Star Wars experience was that all you had to do was you get to a new class and sit down, and somebody would say, "Have you seen Star Wars?" Yeah. And instant friends anywhere you went.
And the same, I think, is with Trek, especially when you're young.
Yes.
Yeah, when all
It's
we
this
had
great
was the
glue
original
that kind of
series
holds
and
us
the
all
animated
together.
series, there was that time.
Yeah.
Joe Panora says that dipshit needs his own show. I love the Jaws-inspired speech, the look between Picard and Jack at the end. Wow, Jack's visions, are those from the prophets? Ooh, that's an interesting theory. I'm certainly not going to say where Jack's visions are coming from, but stay tuned.
That moment with Picard and Jack that's a gut check right there.
It's great. It's great.
Oh,
Heavy duty.
well, I love when let me ask you this. I mean, again, knowing how the sausage is made, when Patrick Stewart gives you that response to your speech and leaves. I mean, were you there? Were you acting opposite him when he's so? I mean, when you guys, I love actors, and it's hard to explain the joy that it instills in a filmmaker, whether you're a producer, director, writer. What you want is an actor to take what's written on the page and plus it, to do something you might not have expected. And when an actor does this, to watch that happen, it is truly magical. And when you're on set and you know this has happened, you just are like, yes. And when you looked at Patrick Stewart respond to you, did you feel something? Or was it the lights are on? Or
Of course. No. That's the thing about, like, again, it's it's the set, it's the atmosphere that's created in the scene. That scene, they let us play it out in one long stretch every time. They would move the cameras, but then we just got to relive it and relive it and relive it, and then dance within the sunbeam. Like, oh, okay, I did it this way last time. I'm going to try it this way. But every time, Patrick goes, "It's all right. It's all right." It breaks me, and you see it on my face. Like, it breaks Shaw, because it's that moment where he went, "I think I went too far."
We've ever seen Picard feel small. Like, in that moment, Picard withdraws, and I don't. It's an interesting thing.
Will Wheaton said the same. Will Wheaton said the same thing to Todd on the Ready Room. He said, I've known Patrick Stewart for 35 years, and this is the first time he felt small. And they even shoot it the way Frakes shoots it. When Picard walks
walking out the arch.
Oh yeah, man.
And it breaks me. It breaks me where he. It's almost like he was in a circumstance that was out of his control, but he put himself in there. He went to the shit. Like, there's so many complicated emotions that led to him becoming Locutus, and then the repercussions of that, and then watching this man carry all that with him. It's like, there's this great movie. It's a Anne Hathaway movie that I believe, where Bill Irwin's in it. She got an Oscar for it, I think. It was a wedding movie. It was I forget the name of it, and I'm blanking on it. But she was responsible for the death of her brother in a car accident. And that guilt that he's living with, I'm living with survivor's guilt. He's living with the guilt that somebody hijacked his body and committed genocide with it. And you just go, ah. And that moment for Shaw, when he sees the way Picard reacts to it, it does. That's why he says, "I've substituted asshole for charm."
It's the Joseph Campbell. It's the in the hero's journey. It's the abyss, right? It's that moment
it's the belly
of
of the beast. It's the belly of the beast.
Belly of the beast, yeah. And it's also the moment where it's probably the healing moment for Shaw, right?
It's the beginning, anyway, right?
Yeah,
it's the beginning, anyway. We talked about this on the Will Wheaton thing. We literally are in the belly of a beast,
right?
In that moment in the story. So that's like, I love when the metaphor is actualized cinematically. It's like being in the worm in Empire Strikes Back. It's being in the cave in Empire Strikes Back. Like, you will see these, and often I've found, as I've done my research as a writer, going through the hero's journey, the belly of the beast is often an organic environment when truths are revealed.
Mm.
You are either in water or an animal, or like Jonah and the whale. Like, truths are revealed when you are in the belly of the beast, and there's so much truth telling that's happening in that episode.
Yeah.
Irene Jobson, who's one of our randiest viewers on this channel, says, "Who wants to go space jellyfishing?" Come on, Irene. We have to let these creatures grow and flourish. There's a lot of them. Maybe they'll start their own United Federation of Planets. 200 Watt Studio says, "I love the Shaw and Seven interactions." Now, I got to ask you about that. You know, I'll tell you a funny story so one of my very good friends from high school, her name was Kelly Goto. She went to Northwestern in Chicago, right? Is it Northwestern in Chicago?
Yeah, that's where Jerry went.
Well, they were friends. And when Jerry first moved out here, I knew her as Lynn because it was Jerry.
Well, it's her middle name.
It's her middle name, but she was Lynn, and we all used to hang out. And
that's fun.
Kelly's boyfriend Sean, who was one of my very best friends who passed away 10 years ago, did like a photo shoot with her, and for he did clothing. I don't even know if she would ever, because I've never, after this, I don't even know. This is 30 years ago. And she's actually a poster of hers in Free Enterprise, my movie Free Enterprise. So is Brandon Clayla, which we'll get to in a minute. He's in Free Enterprise too. The fact that you guys wrote a book together. Yeah. And so is the kid who played a kid who was in Deep Space Nine. But your scenes with Jerry Ryan, all of them are just spectacular. And I know, you know, like you brought up earlier, the whole idea of dead naming has become very important to certain members of the community. One of my favorite Star Trek pundits is Jessie Gender. Yeah. And Jessie, she's talked a lot about that on her shows. And I love her because when she was doing her favorite TOS episodes, she picked Balance of Terror.
There it is.
As her number one show.
That's a good submarine show.
She knows her stuff. And she's talked a lot about this. And her reviews, by the way, I don't know if you've caught up with her reviews.
Spot on. Yes, I have. I've seen her stuff. I saw her little post with the up and down guy, Sean. I saw her little post show when they were standing outside of the Chinese right after the premiere.
Oh, right.
So yeah, it's fun.
How great was that night, by the way? I mean, how cool was that to be at the?
It was surreal, and it really hit home when I walked into the Chinese and saw my uniform in a glass case. Like,
to have that kind of, you know, it's funny. I really wanted to talk to her, and I think I caught her out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't say anything.
Well, it was bananas.
It was bananas.
Everybody was there.
How incredible was it to see Star Trek Picard on a big screen at the Chinese theater? Wouldn't it be great if we could, I don't know, recreate that experience again? Maybe somehow, some way, I don't know, but it would be fun if we could. For everyone. I wish, you know, because that was a great night seeing Star Trek, because it's really cinematic, isn't it?
Everybody should have the opportunity to see Picard on the big screen somehow. And
that would be lovely.
You know, wouldn't it be great?
I do want to, before we move past it, I want to go back to what we were discussing about the fans, Jessie, reacting to I really don't like him dead naming her. I really don't like
that. You know what's funny? I will say this too. I didn't think about that. And
it's not part of your experience.
No. And the fact that this is why I think representation matters.
Huge.
And I will say this. It fucking pays off.
Well, what I want to say to it is, you said something wonderful before, Rob, in one of your other broadcasts, where you said Star Trek should not tell you what to think, it should make you think. And what I love about that precept is we take the concept of dead naming. It's not by accident. You're supposed to not be happy with him dead naming her. It
Right.
is part of social commentary
Mhm.
about where we are at now, but attaching it to a Borg in science fiction
It's
is what
allegorical.
makes it a
It's
Star Trek story. So
yes.
I love that. And so, yes, you are supposed to not like that Shaw dead names her. And you are supposed to go, that's a broken man doing a wrong thing.
Yes.
So good. I am glad people reacted poorly. I don't want to know the person who goes, I'm glad he did. Like,
Right.
no,
Well,
no, that's
well, and what's so great
insensitive.
about that
And
whole
that's,
little plot
yeah.
what is the way, like, it's Sidney LaForge who gives her the respect of using her the name she prefers, and then that pays off in the plot in this episode
Oh my
in a
God.
beautiful
So
way.
good.
It comes back
It's
around,
science
right?
fiction.
In your I mean, and this is beautiful Star Trek. This is
Yeah.
what Star Trek does best. And it does it in an allegorical way that it makes sense. And I loved that exchange, how'd you know? And when she explains it, she's telling you without telling you, but she's saying, well, you're a douchebag, and we just had our lives saved because somebody respects me. And you're
So good. The
so
layers
good.
are beautiful, and you watch Shaw internalize that. Doesn't he
Yeah,
say something
yeah.
like "good call"? Like,
Yeah.
I think I
So
kind of go "good call."
yeah. And so
You're like,
everybody's character arc gets to move forward, right?
And again,
It's
this
so
is
good.
why the writing on this show, I don't think a lot of people are recognizing just how good the writing has been and how everything that happened leading up to this point, the emotional
Yeah.
wallop that this episode packs
Yeah.
had to have all of and we don't have a lot of Vadic. We have something very interesting with Vadic though. She's talking to somebody else. We don't know. We have no Worf and no Raffi in this episode. It's really a ship-centric show,
Yep.
and yet everything that's led up to it makes it as resonant as it is.
It's
But I think the key here is we've had the opportunity, Rob and I certainly, and a lot of the press had an opportunity to see these things in a stretch, all in a binge, right? The first
Right.
6 episodes. Rob, you've obviously seen them all. I've seen the first 6, and there is really something to watching them back to back.
Yes.
It makes all of that resonance really, really hit home in a powerful way.
What I do like, and I'm fading, guys, because I've had a day.
We've been talking. Look,
But what I want to say is, I love the weekly release.
oh
I
yeah,
love the fact that the fans get to masticate on this all week long
Yeah.
before they get to the next episode.
Yep.
I think when you binge, it becomes a solitary experience and you have no one to reach to. It's like, oh, yeah, I watched all of it.
Yeah.
I'll wait till you watch all of it so we can
Yeah.
talk about it. But when you get it one episode a week, like we did growing up,
Right.
it creates speculation and fun. And I hate him. I love him. I this and that. Because you're not getting the full arc of a character, you're getting it the way he's intended to be received, and I love that.
And then the beauty is you get to go binge once you really are able to experience it. Then you get to go back and binge, and relive it again.
Todd, just a few comments, and
Please.
I do want to say one more thing to get to your book because I want to talk about this just for a quick second.
Please.
Mr. Tickletrunk says in episode 4, the show finally clicked. Todd has been stealing the show from me. It's blasphemy. But I have to say, you are my favorite part. You are a fantastic actor. I was going to stop, but now I'm in, so thank you. I'm so glad RMB had Todd on tonight. Consensus is that we all want a Captain Shaw show now, and you need to hear it from people who wrote off the rest of modern Trek. Captain Shaw needs more screen time. We demand more. And Binary Sunset Media, who made this shirt for me,
that's a great shirt,
and sent it to me. Binary Sunset Media says, Todd, you are awesome.
Oh, thank you, Binary Sunset, and thank you that last commenter. It's again, like I said it before. Like every once in a while, you get a good one, and I got a good one. They wrote me a buffet, and it's been a delight.
Now, James Wallace says, I love this conversation. And James actually went to your book signing, which I didn't know anything about. Otherwise, I would have gone. Also,
I
Todd's
only
book.
tweeted about it a lot, but whatever.
I know. I'm sorry. Todd's book is awesome. Now, let me just show everybody, the folks at home. Here is a book Todd has written, Mystic Libations, which, by the way, a book about drinks, a book about alcoholic beverages. If any book is written just for me, that's this book. And not only that, but Todd Stashwick wrote it with Brandon Clayla, one of my favorite people in the world who I've known for 25 years. Todd, tell me about this book. What is this book?
This book?
That book. Look at that book.
So,
it looks like a Dungeon Master's guide from back in the 79.
During the sort of the height of lockdown, I met Brandon, and he was a fan of 12 Monkeys. So once again, Terry Metellus connection. And he has a website called Trader Brandon where he sells tiki themed stuff. He was an Imagineer, and we got to talking and found out, just like talking with you guys, both kids of the 80s who love this stuff. He had never played D&D, and I'm like, well, that's a crime.
What?
And he plays like Fireball Island with Giacchino, and he's a gamer, but he'd never played D&D. And so I'm like, well, now that we are in lockdown, I've been playing a lot of D&D on Zoom, so we started playing D&D on Zoom, and then with other people. And we would rope them in, and I would send out an email, and I said, you know what, with your tiki expertise and my, penchant for puns, why don't we make a D&D themed cocktail for this week? And he's like, I love it. And he would do, because he's an amazing art director and he's a wizard with page layout and design and whatnot. And so we did like 3 or 4 of these things, and then we were like, I think we're on to something. So I said, I will write the narrative. So we'll have a story that pulls through it, and then he just crafted this book, got this guy Roy Hansel, who is a bartender at Trader Sam's at Disneyland, to craft all the recipes. We drafted artists, my son being one of them, to do kind of amazing splash pages for this. Let me show you the art. It's just spectacular. We put it on Kickstarter. We ended up selling
Wow.
over 1,000 copies, and that paid for a really nice print run. So I wrote all the narrative stuff, which then culminates, if you're a D&D person, it culminates into an actual playable one-shot at the back. And there's different stories that head off each chapter. So it's like rum and tequila. Then it's like gin and vodka. Then it's whiskey drinks. And it's a lot of art. It's a lot of stories. And it's a lot of recipes. And for D&D hardcore people, there is a new playable subclass. There's NPCs. There's magic items. If you just want cocktails, there's a lot of cocktails.
Okay, Todd, I was going to buy a copy of this book, and I went to Amazon, and it's like it's out of print. I can't get one. Where can people buy this?
TheNerdCircus.com. If you go to TheNerdCircus.com, and I'm going to tell you something right now because I'm doing it this week, because I just got back from the cruise and I just did a book signing, and I thought, okay, this week, if you buy a copy at TheNerdCircus.com, by Sunday, I will sign those copies.
Oh, well, now you've done it.
I'm in.
Now you've done it. There's hundreds of people watching this show. I hope you have your Sharpies ready.
So I have, so if you go to TheNerdCircus.com, there's also T-shirts there, and D&D dice and dice towers and Mai Tai glasses and just a bunch of nerdy stuff. And it's a very 70s nerd-themed site, because that's where I started my nerddom.
Yeah.
So it's all wood panel and orange shag rugs. So if you go to the Nerd Circus, if you buy Mystic Libations by this Sunday, I will sign that copy right now.
Well, Todd Stashwick, first of all, you become one of my new favorite people in the world, even though we met 10 years ago because of Nikki Griffin, who's also one of my favorite people in the world.
Nikki Griffin.
She's like the girl that got away. I just wasn't good enough. I don't know. What can I say? But it's great to have you here. Thank you for being on our Picard After Show. It means a great deal to me that you were here.
Yeah, Todd, great to meet you, man. Really loving what you're doing.
You too, Bubba.
And meeting you through Terry, and I can't wait to see, well, I know it's going to happen, but I'm sure I can't wait to see what everyone else thinks about Captain Liam Shaw's journey. And I really hope that the real victory, I want a 12-inch Exo 6 figure of Captain Shaw. I know you do. What would that mean to you to have a museum quality Liam Shaw?
I want to, like a Sideshow or Hot Toys or I want Amigo.
Well, that might happen.
Amigo.
You want to? How cool? By the way,
I want to be able to put Amigo next to my Kirk and Spock, just to complete the circle, because that's how it all started.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me give you your final word, Mr. Liam Shaw, Captain Shaw.
Yes.
What was it like serving with gentlemen like Captain Jean-Luc Picard or Admiral Jean-Luc Picard and of course William T. Riker? What was it like for you to serve with them for at least a short period of time? Imagine I'm a Federation reporter.
Aside from the fact that they stole my ship and put my entire crew at jeopardy, all kidding aside, it was an absolute highlight of my career, and it will fortify me for my nerd heart for the rest of my life. It was unbelievable.
Well, the real question is, are you going to start listening to jazz now?
No.
Todd Stashwick, thank you so much for being on the show, and I can't wait to talk with you again, sir. Thank you so much.
Peace.
All right. Live long and prosper.
Guys. Peace.
Bill, come on.
Well, that was great, man. What a
fun
conversation
was that? I mean,
what a fun conversation.
What's really interesting is, there are few actors that their nerddom goes as deep as Stashwick's does. I mean, you can see the room he exists in, and the D&D and the whole. I mean, it's deep.
There's commonality. I sense commonality with all of us, right?
It's true. Todd's still staying here. Wait, do you want me to put you back on the show? Oh, you don't know how to get out. Well, hang on. Wait. Since it's deep, here, I'll bring you right back. Just what do you want to say? Your last comment.
What I will say is, it is all of this stuff that as I hold my Cornelius action figure, it is all this stuff that
don't look. Actually, it's Dr. Zayas. Don't look for it, Taylor. You might not like what you find.
It is all of this stuff that drove me to want to be an actor in the first place. So the fact that my common joke is I spend my adult life living the childhood of my dreams. So this is the stuff that fueled me as a boy and continues to fuel me as a man. So I got to figure out how to get out of here.
No, I'll let you go. I'm going to send you the Graham Norton red chair right now. So thank you, sir. You're the man.
Take care.
Well,
that was lovely, man. That was lovely. What a good conversation.
First of all, I love that guy. I feel like I'm not doing enough. I have to say that we just sold Tango Shalom to the UK. Tango Shalom, the movie that I produced and edited.
Yeah.
And I feel, I've got another movie that I've produced called The White Devils coming out. I feel like I need to make another movie just to make another movie with Todd Stashwick.
Yeah. I'd love to see that guy end up like on For All Mankind or something, man. He's so good. He is so good. He brings so much to a role.
It's really funny. I didn't even know this, but there's a woman I hold in very high regard named Adrienne Biddle, who she is a movie producer herself. She worked with Brian Bertino, who made The Strangers. They made a movie called Mockingbird that he stars in.
Wow.
And
it's fascinating. This is such a small industry. You are never the more you dig, and obviously we've been around in this, for 30
We're
plus
all
years.
lifers, man.
Right, exactly.
We're
And like
lifers.
the longer you're in this industry,
You've
the
either
more
worked
you
with
realize-
someone or dated them.
Yeah, you're only ever like 1 or 2 degrees away from pretty much anybody in this industry. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you gotta love that guy, but what's interesting is I think his performance, I would call it a little Baroque. His delivery is, and I think we've never,
It's unique, especially in the Star Trek universe.
Yes.
His Captain Shaw is a very unique character.
Very unique character.
Yet very relatable and very grounded, and he in dimensional from moment one. Like, that's really hard to do, man.
Really hard to do.
He's right. It's in the writing, obviously, very, very, very great writing, but also in just the way he brings an air of lived in experience to his role. I mean, the thing about the season of Picard is you've got all of these, the big 7 characters from the Next Generation that you know and love, and you're catching up with them after they've lived, another 30 years.
Well, and that's why I've been a little dismayed by some of the commentary. Like, these characters wouldn't act this way. I'm like, 20 plus years have gone by.
Yeah, they're different people. They're the same, but they're also different. And what's great is the way a character like Shaw, and now we see 7 as well, and some of these other characters, they don't detract. They all add something, and they all feel real. They all feel real and grounded. And I buy all of them as really human beings. I buy all of them as Starfleet professionals.
Me too.
That's the joy of this season is I buy what I'm seeing. I buy in. It feels real. It feels like authentic.
I mean, that's you just nailed what my problem has been with modern Star Trek is I haven't believed it.
Yeah.
I mean, even the sets of Discovery, all these big open spaces, let's not even talk about the turbolifts. That's not what a starship, this isn't Star Wars. There's not big open walkways and giant shafts that go to nowhere.
Right.
I mean, it's been, and this has been very, I mean, in a way, this is a show, and I don't want to say like, oh, I'm old now, but this is a show about aging and experience and what life teaches you.
Yeah, look, I mean, all of these major characters are close to their 70s or in their 70s.
Well,
right?
all the principal actors, Patrick Stewart's 82, Gates McFadden is 74,
right?
Michael Dorn is 70,
and yet, and
LeVar Burton's like the Brent Spiner's 74.
Yeah,
although we haven't seen him. LeVar Burton, I think, is 66. He's the youngest of the original crew.
Right. But what's great is you see these characters and they're working side by side with Shaw, who's obviously in his 50s, and 7, who's in 40s, 50s, and I don't know how old 7 is supposed to be, but she's younger, somewhat younger.
Yeah.
But then you've got all these young bridge, characters, and they're all like it doesn't feel like
Frakes
we're
is
seeing
70
generations. They're all one crew, and they're treating each other as equals, and they're acting as professionals, and they're competent, and it's just. Man, it's so satisfying to see that, because that's the way this should be. That's the kind of Star Trek that we grew up with. And I Terry said something the other day, which is that he wished that all of these people who love Picard season 3, he wished they wouldn't talk about it in such a way that it feels isolating to those other characters and to those other, the other shows, these newer shows that younger people are buying into. I totally get that. And what I want more than anything,
he's absolutely right.
Yeah, because they're coming to Star Trek. This is their first experience of Star Trek, and they love it. And what I want nothing more is than a show that for this franchise to move forward and to bring everybody along and to treat everybody as equals and to treat them all as competent professionals and to show us the joy of exploring and the wonder of exploring. I mean, this episode, more than any that I've seen in a long time, brings that sense of wonder home, and that sense of awe. I mean, when you're an officer in Starfleet and you're going out and you're experiencing these things, you should be awed by what you're seeing.
Yes,
I mean, it's the universe is an extraordinary place, and I think it's fitting that these characters are experiencing that, and that wonder, that sense of wonder and fun, is just what's been missing for me. And I want Star Trek going forward to capture all of this and bring it all together. There's no reason that you can't make a Star Trek show. I know there's everybody has their favorite Star Trek show, but there's no reason we can't have a new show going forward, or even a film or whatever it is that is for everybody. Because Star Trek has always been for everybody. That's the whole point of Star Trek. It's always brought everyone along.
Well, I also think that Star Trek is inherently about optimism for the future.
Yes.
And Star Trek has been very dystopian since 2009.
It has. You're absolutely right.
And I'll tell you something, the awe and wonder, like you just spoke about, to me, the end of Close Encounters had awe and wonder in it. And Star Trek to me always had that. And it has definitely been missing. And I understand. I think Star Trek has kind of been treading water. They've tried to figure out, because the people that are making it, they don't know what it's supposed to be. You know, they know it's a franchise, but they're looking at it as a franchise. And they're like, and the problem is with IPs being so de rigueur in Hollywood now. Everyone wants to deal with a franchise, but no one actually stops and asks themselves, why did this become a franchise?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, you know, Terry understands, and also to know Terry, I mean, I don't know him that well. We've never gotten like hammered and told each other stories or anything, but he is a very kind man. And he is, I mean, the fact that he's been very kind to me, which he necessarily shouldn't have been, you know,
right.
But he has been.
Right. And he didn't have to. And certainly, you know, there's a degree to which the sort of Paramount ecosystem has been very hostile to fans, not unlike you who have been upset with what they've seen.
And I have to say that
frustrated by it.
Well, when you see a man who's created something like, I admire Terry now even more so with going through 12 Monkeys. But when I saw Terry with his son, you know, at the Hollywood Bowl, I mean, he's a man that is, I think he's a humanist. I don't want to speak for him, but he's somebody who cares. And this episode,
I mean, the humanism rings forth in this whole season.
Yeah, and look, guy, he worked for Brandon Braga. He's seen it all.
Yeah.
But he's a doting father, he's a husband, he's a dog owner, and he cares. And by the way, he loves Macross, which is part of Robotech. Huge fan, owns animation cells. He's also a dyed-in-the-wool. Do you know that Terry Metalis owns 2 drivable DeLoreans? One completely.
That's what you said.
I mean, come on, he's so one of us.
He's also was it Seymour that's behind him in
oh my God,
Shop of Horrors, and a lot when you see him in a lot of the
suddenly Seymour,
right?
Because I'm a dentist.
He clearly gets it,
and by the way, his wife is Pink 5. His wife started. He married a woman, a beautiful, hot X-wing fighter pilot. Like, I mean, you think about the ultimate action figure. He wins at life, and he made this. He made this season of Star Trek.
But the thing of it is like what he's infused in this season, which is what I feel has been missing, is that sense that this is a future I want to be a part of.
Yeah,
like this is the future I want to see, man. Because when we were kids growing up watching the original series and the Next Generation, it just felt like, man, I want to be a part of that world. I want to be a part of that journey. That how do we get from here to there? I want to be a part of that.
Well,
and that's what's been missing. And because as you've said, Star Trek since 2009 has been very dystopian. Yes. Very dystopian in a really kind of disturbing way.
And also it's been glib.
Yeah.
The Kobayashi Maru scene in Star Trek 09 is to me one of the most fundamental misunderstandings of Star Trek ever.
Yeah.
You know, when he's eating the apple, and if you actually see the deleted scene where Kirk seduces an Orion, a girl, to reprogram the simulation for him.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah. It feels there's a cynicism that it feels like it's
because you know what, there's this idea. Look, what I love about and this episode more than any other, it embraces the higher ideals of what we as human beings aspire to be.
100%, 100%. Everybody contributing and achieving something they couldn't achieve on their own. And in the middle of this dire, tense moment, growing as human beings, and also seeing this thing that is extraordinary and having that experience and being informed by that, right? That's the essence of Star Trek, man.
You know, and who would have thought that it would be Dr. Crusher who appeals to Will using Deanna as an example.
Yeah.
And then he walks into the bridge, comes back around, and he's like, if we could open up the nacelles.
Yeah. It's that moment where it's like, if we're going to die, let's die doing what we know we're great at.
I mean, he'd forgotten it. He tells Picard he'd forgotten himself. He was wallowing in his mournful. I mean, he felt bad.
Right.
He was too.
And it's not just that he felt bad, but he was struggling. And normally you would reach out to your loved one for help there, except that he knows she can feel everything he's feeling. And Deanna can feel everything, and it's why he doesn't want to put that despair on her.
And he knew that she could feel what was in him. Yeah. I mean, and I have to say, Bill, this is pretty profound to me, as you get older. I mean, every single day that clicks by, not to be depressing, because I love life. I enjoy it, but you're always, there's more days behind you than
we've
in front of you.
We've both lost family members. We've both lost friends.
Yeah.
We've both lost people that mattered to us. And as you get older, this is just natural. And people you admire start to pass away. And, you think about these things, and it does change your perspective in a lot of ways. And it's profound.
But what's great about, and I think, and it plays out more throughout the season.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is the old guard and the new guard. What is it we are going to leave behind? And I think what was really interesting at the beginning of this episode, you have Picard, you have Riker talking to the bridge crew. They're young,
right?
And he's 70 years old. But they're all working synergistically, and he's like, what do I need to know? What can we do? Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's try. And Star Trek is all about not young people, not old people. It's about all people coming together. And also, we America is a youth-oriented culture. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in terms of the fan reaction, there's definitely a schism in this show. And there's someone wrote that this show is so slow. I'm like, what? Slow? There's so much narrative thrust in this episode with all these different characters, and everyone's talking to everybody.
But you have to remember, the pop culture at this time is very much, it's all about the roller coaster experience, right?
Right. Yeah.
And let's be honest, Star Trek for the last 20 years has been very much about the roller coaster experience.
But it hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. And that's not,
I mean, literally a roller coaster. The Discovery's turbo lifts are a roller coaster.
Yeah. Look, man, if you're walking out the door in the morning and going to work or going to whatever friend's house, and you're experiencing a roller coaster existence, that's not life, man. That's not what life is like.
No.
And so there's an authenticity here that I think is important. And, it just, all of our entertainment is this big roller coaster experience, good versus evil. And everything is very, very simplistic and boiled down to its essence and black and white. And I love that this is a show about human beings, man. This is a show about human beings in a tough moment, coming together, remembering who they are, struggling with where they are, and maybe figuring out a new path, helping each other to become better. Like that's the essence of life. That's the essence of humanity.
Yeah. Well, listen, let me just rifle through these. We got some great by the way, the chat and the viewers tonight, thank you for all of your contributions. Thank you guys, not just for supporting the show, but for being awesome. I mean, we've had some great comments, great commentary in the live chat. Bradley Burnett, good last name. Damn it. Todd Stashwick is too damn charming. I'm liking Shaw more and more. And yeah, I just bought his book. FYI, Free Enterprise is one of my watch every year movies. Thanks for the great stream. Well, hopefully It's the 25th anniversary of its world premiere, so hopefully this year we'll be able to get out a 4K because I'd like nothing better.
Man, at least a Blu-ray.
I know, right? Swack Props, Cal. By the way, if you have not gone Swack, it's SWAK PROPS. The man's a genius. Go to his Etsy store. He makes prop recreations of paper products like the map of the Misty Mountains, books, Rorschach's journal. I mean, the guy, it's amazing. He's amazing.
Nice.
Swack Prop says, imagine if Picard Season 3 had been our introduction to New Trek back in 2017 instead of Discovery. There would probably be less vitriol in Trek fandom. I don't know, man. I think fans are vitriolic, but maybe you're right.
I think that ship sailed because it's something to do with social media. I mean, I think the algorithmic nature of social media just primes everybody to be like, you know, they go sign on and it's like, who am I offended by today? Like, who am I gonna...
Look, I have to tell you, Bill, I knew that by me singing the praises of this show, the slings and arrows, you're just a paid shill, Rob Burnett. I'm like, I'm blocked by Paramount Plus. William Shatner, a man I work with, I'm blocked by William Shatner on Twitter because his social media people don't know, or whether maybe it was accident or who knows. But I knew, dude. I'm gonna throw it all out there. I'm going. Yeah. Even Terry is like, are you sure you want to go this hard on the show? Because what if people don't like it? I'm like, fuck it, dude. I know it's good. Yeah. I'm the final arbiter. I know.
You have to have the courage of your own convictions, right?
And I went out all in because you know what?
Yeah.
And by the way, Terry's not paying me.
No.
I mean, truth be told, he did give me the Via Vision box set of 12 Monkeys that I'm gonna watch. It's right over there.
I'm gonna have to email Via Vision tomorrow and say,
dude,
hey,
it's like they only made 1,000.
I'm in.
It's
I'm
like
totally
special.
In.
It's fucking
totally
great.
In.
That box
set
is great. And he did give it to me.
Oh, that's cool.
Just saying. I mean,
all right.
So
here's the thing.
But that was after I've been shilling for him for years or months.
What I've learned in 25 years of running the digital bits, right, through multiple format wars now, and what I've learned is that it's something I call the 30% rule. The moment you open your mouth online and express an opinion about anything, 30% of the people out there are going to disagree with you. And about 30% of that 30% are going to be really angry about it. And that's just the nature of it. I mean, if you've got an opinion and you express an opinion, someone's going to be triggered by that, or someone's going to be offended by that, or someone's going to be pissed off by that. Yeah. And they're going to want to have beef with you, and they might build up a resentment or whatever. That's just the nature of it. That's the nature of the society we live in. But I think the key is if you express, if you're trying to be honest about it, and not, if you're honest, if you're not cynical, if you just say what you truly believe and share what you love and explain why you love it, I think you're going to find more people who get it. I mean, I've known you a long time, and when you started talking about Picard, it was like, oh shit, I'm in. Like, I'm in.
Well, Bill, all the way back into the aughts, you had me on your panel at Comic-Con. I was, when Superman Returns got made in 2005,
you
Brian Singer do a thing,
behind the scenes footage and stuff. It's
and Brian's, we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is I don't remember where I met you. I feel like I've just known you forever, man.
I don't either.
I know. I can't remember. I would assume it was probably like at Dave's Video, the laser place, like one of the studio days.
I don't. But by the way, people should know, like, you and I both worked on the Axonar project.
Yeah.
When I saw again, it echoed something we were going to do in Star Trek Axonar. You and I both were in a unique position. You wrote, I thought, a fantastic script for the Star Trek Axonar feature film, which didn't have a finished script when we were both involved. And the funny thing is there is a remnant. So for those of you out there in the world, you can watch what's called Axonar: The Vulcan Scene, and you and I did that. It was something I had you rewrite it, and we shot it. We did it in an afternoon with one 20 by 20 foot by 20 foot green screen. It was a proof of concept. I was planning to reshoot it on the big giant green screen we did. but we did it with Gary Graham. You and I actually did make 1 3-minute Star Trek scene together.
We did, and I'm
We
you
did.
know, and look, we worked on that script for a long time, and it's, you know, you can find that script online, the original feature film script for Axanar that was
Yeah.
going to get shot.
And
It's
if
out
you
there,
look my
and we worked
Axanar
on that, and I'm really
Origins,
proud of that.
there's 50 the Axanar Origins. I've been accused of stealing money. I've been accused, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world. But you can see the work. The work, you know, if you guys, anyone watching this, go watch the Axanar Origins discs or discs. The Axanar Origins videos that are on my channel. You can
here's
find
the
all
interesting
that.
thing about that is if you've got this PDF of that screenplay that we worked on, every single visual effect shot you can find it in the script. You can find the moment in the script.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you know,
and
that's
the
thing
visual
is, people
effects
don't
weren't
realize-
entirely done, but you know they were there.
Yeah, but when people don't realize when that lawsuit dropped, you know, there was a lot of Axanar that was already in the can. There was a lot of visual effect shots. Music was being created. I mean, it's
you can hear the absolutely. And you know what, Bill?
I mean, it's like, look,
we're gonna do it again. We're not maybe not Star Trek, but we're gonna do it again. I mean,
someday, somehow. But I will say that I'm proud of that. I mean, I'm proud of our contribution.
Me too. I mean, it was going to be no one. Look, I was already so. It's very funny because I spent, you know, professionally, I was a Star Trek consultant in the mid '90s for Paramount and Viacom. Worked on the Star Trek Experience. Worked for CBS for 3 years with Roger Lay doing.
Yeah.
By the way, I heard something very interesting that I can tell you about off screen.
Okay. By the way, the interesting thing about that is I
that has nothing to do with modern Star Trek.
No, I consulted with Paramount Home Entertainment like many times over the years. They would come to me and ask, like, you know, what do you think we should do?
Yeah.
What would fans want? I mean, many times I talked to those guys and advised them about the path forward with Blu-ray and 4K and that kind of thing. So it's like, you know, we've been around in this business for a while now, man.
A long time.
Talking Star Trek.
Let me just rifle through these.
Sure.
Journey's End says you should get Todd on again at the end of Act 2 of this season, Episode 8. He's the man. Maybe I will. Binary Sunset Media says Picard 3 is better than M3. M3. What am I missing with that? I'm not sure what you mean. What is M3? If Picard season 3, what is M3? I don't know.
Not sure.
Binary, I love you, but I don't know what that means. Echo Base Network, who is amazing. I love Nick and Coach. Todd, have you ever had whiskey and ginger beer? It's my go-to drink. Eagle Rare is my all-time favorite whiskey. Well, Todd's not here anymore. I'm sorry. I would have asked.
I bet there's something in that book, though.
Oh my God! Everyone's got to get that book. Binary Sunset Media says Todd's awesome. 200 Watt Studio says, will we get Sisko in the end showing Riker his son in the afterlife? I think it's not a spoiler to say there is no Benjamin Sisko in this. Even though the changelings are there, there's no Ben Sisko. There's no...
Yeah.
Echo Base Network says, it's my birthday today. Can I get a happy birthday message from the panel? Well, that's Nick asking us. I mean, Todd's not here. I didn't see that.
No.
But hey,
But
you know what?
Birthday, man. What a great way to spend your birthday, watching great Star Trek and talking about it afterwards.
Echo Base Network, Coach Nick, I love you guys. You've always supported me. You've done great. You've made documentaries. You've done amazing content. You've set the bar as far as YouTube is concerned. And I love you. How about that? Is that okay?
There you go.
Mr. Tickle Trunk. Oh, I already said that. I more screen time. We demand more. I got that. Echo Base Network goes on to say, Todd, I would love to have, maybe Todd's still watching. Todd, I'd love to have you and Terry along with R&B sometime to talk Picard and Star Wars. Picard Season 3 is the best track I've seen so far since DS9, even though I do have some minor nitpicks. Well, that's okay.
Everybody's got their headcanon, man.
200 Watt Studio says, love your performance, Todd. Your interactions with Seven are fantastic. Side note, love the synergy of Riker throwing the asteroid at Vadic after she threw a ship at him.
Returning the favor.
So good. Billy D. Shillams says, I wish you would have called her Hanson after she killed the goo. Well, that's not up to him. He had to do with what the writers said. Tom Jr. Jackson, our moderator, says, Rob and Bill, great show, and Todd, fantastic episode 4, and glad to see you here.
You know what I would love to see?
Bradley Burnett became a member, by the way.
Oh, nice.
And Donovan 778 says, incredible episode, great work, Todd. So
I would love to see. I don't know what's happening now. I'm lobbying really, really hard behind the scenes for Picard season 3 to find its way to Blu-ray and 4K. It'll obviously come out on Blu-ray, because of the other seasons have.
Well, it'll be like the Marvel movies. I'll have to upscale it.
I want to see, right, but still, it'll have deep color. It'll have uncompressed. It'll look fantastic.
Well, they've had a real problem putting this up because everyone talks about how dark it is.
I think the Paramount Plus app is having handshake issues because what's supposed to happen when you've got a 4K display or a high def display, the way it's supposed to work is the app, whatever the streaming app you're watching or the device, the player you're watching, Roku or a Blu-ray player, whatever it is, you're supposed to handshake with the display and go, okay, what can the display handle? And then the stream adjusts so that you get the best picture quality, right? So if you've got a 4K display, you're seeing 4K with high dynamic range, right? And I think what's happening is that Paramount Plus app is having a handshake problem with people's TVs. So some people are seeing the 4K HDR stream, even though all they've got is they don't have 4K.
Dude,
so
I have to tell you.
Right? And that's a problem.
I've watched this on both. I have a beautiful, I have a LG OLED that I've tweaked. It looks great.
Which is a 4K.
A 4K OLED. Yeah. This show is crushed on it. I watch it on my old plasma. It looks amazing.
Interesting.
It looks amazing.
It's got to be some because the show
I'm watching it through Amazon. Paramount Plus has always sucked. Amazon has it in full surrounds.
The Amazon thing might happen because I watch on Paramount Plus and it is full 4K. I mean, it's full 4K with HDR, and I get a great experience. But I think this is part of the problem with the streaming ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's complicated, and every show, a lot of shows that are available in 4K have a 4K version and an HD version, and it's that whole process of handshaking and your display seeing what you're supposed. It's still not perfect, unfortunately.
No.
But hopefully they figured it out.
Well, it's funny because when I watched this, when I saw it, and when we saw it in the theater.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! It looked incredible at the Chinese.
And I'll tell you what, in my home theater I have a projector, an Epson projector, front projector, and a 110-inch screen, and I'm getting full 4K. I mean, HDR, and it looks phenomenal.
Yeah. So, and it's really bothered me. People getting, I can't see it. I'm like, I've seen this. I saw this 3 times all the way through, and it looked amazing. Yeah. And seeing it in the theater, it is so cinematic. And Bill, it would be great if other people could see it in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
And maybe that might happen. We'll see.
Who knows? We'll see. I have no idea whether it's going to happen in the theater, but gosh,
me either. But there might be some cool, Stay tuned.
It's really funny the way this, and again, one of the unsung genius things that Terry Matalas and his writers have done is I don't know if anyone's ever written. I mean, I'm sure they try. But this is very distinctly a 3-act structure in 10 episodes.
In a 10-episode series.
And the first act, and then, Dave Cullen, one of my favorite YouTubers in terms of Star Trek content, and I'm a big fan. If you don't watch Dave Cullen, he's actually been doing deep dives into 70s dystopian movies. He just did Colossus, the Forbin Project, and he did. It's funny because he hadn't seen these movies. They're movies we grew up with, but I really like Dave Cullen a lot, and it's funny because we've been streaming together, but I want to sit down and talk with him. Like we haven't been able. Like we're on these streams, like, but anyway.
Yeah. I was going to say earlier. I'm hoping that this stuff comes out in 4K, and obviously there'll be a Blu-ray and stuff. And I would love to think that those physical media things will have audio commentary.
Yeah.
But if they don't, I would love it. It would be so cool for you to have like Terry and Todd on the show and do a live audio commentary for a couple of these episodes, right? Because
Oh.
there's so many insights into the writing, the thought process, the every little. I mean, it's clear that Terry has sweated every little detail from the production design and the ship design and the writing, the every moment, the music, the score. Like, he's thought deeply about all of this stuff, and I would love to hear him talking about that at length.
Well, here's the thing. Terry's a really humble guy. He doesn't even understand. I don't even think Terry understands how great what he's done actually is. And I've been telling him, and I told him, because he didn't believe me. And I think today he finally texted me. He's like, maybe you're right. Maybe people are coming around. I'm like, man, dude, I'm crying here. I'm sitting here crying, watching, and by the way, I don't know why, but this is incredibly rewatchable. And maybe it's because the characters are so real. I buy them. I buy into them.
It's the characters, and it's everything. It's every aspect of it. It's the production design. It's the environment. It's the verisimilitude of what you're seeing. It's all the deep legacy stuff that's being honored. It's the performances. Every time you watch, you can focus on something different and get something out of it. It really is lovely.
Weston says, I thought Seven's arc on Voyager was from being called 7 of 9 to being called Annika. Doesn't it make sense to switch as she recovers her individuality and gives up the collective? Well, here's the thing. I think no, because her real identity is 7 of 9. She doesn't know what Annika is. That was when she was a kid. That's not her experience.
Well, I know that, but it's interesting because she too has lived 30 years since the end of that stuff, and that is a realization that she's come to, is that like she has to forge her own identity, and part of her identity is the fact that she was a Borg, and it's it's an indelible part of who she is, more even than childhood.
She transitioned,
and she's right, and she is now a new being. She's not, she wasn't who she was before she became a Borg. She's not who she was when she was a Borg. She's something new, and she's not even who she was at the end of Voyager. She's becoming, a unique,
which is in a way, that's something that I think that we need to come to grips with. People who transition are something new, something that hasn't yet maybe existed,
and they're forging their own path, and they have every right to, and they should, you should 100%. Respect that, and
Benson Green says, I noticed in the end credits that one of the shots has music notes that Data was whistling in the pilot of the Next Generation. That's really cool.
It's interesting how many little. I mean, what I love about this season, I was going to talk about this without giving anything away.
Oh my God! The end credits.
Many of the things we've seen in these first 4 episodes are hinted at in little moments in the credits, right? Like, what I love about the show is that it's not hiding the fact there are things coming, that it's not hiding, it's subtly hinting at. But then while you're focused on that, there's other stuff coming that the show's not giving you any clue is coming at all. And so you get both. You get the joy of discovering these big moments and these big reveals, but you also get the anticipation of like knowing, oh, maybe this is that, and maybe this is going to be that. And it's like, it's so satisfying.
But I got to give a shout out to Benson for noticing that. And by the way, those musical notes, they're pretty out there. They're not hiding them. They're in the end credits. But
no, that's the thing.
For Benson to know what that is, and good on you, sir.
Well,
and
look, it's the fact that in this episode,
you will be rewarded for that.
The fact that the Nebula in this episode is a living being has been kind of hinted at for a couple of episodes. They're not. They're not hiding it. But what's great is they drop these little things, and you see these little things, but then you get so wrapped up in the character stuff that you kind of forget for a moment, and then it pays off, and it's like so it just feels so right.
Benson actually said, Todd, I really enjoyed your character arc so far. Your acting chops are amazing. Kind of reminds me of Sisko from the first episode of Deep Space Nine. I totally agree. Ron C. says, gentlemen, hello. I'm enjoying the new ship smell. Looking forward to the next episode. Uh, I think I already said Julio Scissors, Frakes channeling Shatner with a shipwide address to the crew, which was great. 200 Watt Studio says, after hearing Riker's speech about no afterlife, I want to see Cisco come back in the end and show him his son. Well, there's none of that, but I understand that would be cool.
But you know, the great thing is he has that dark moment of the soul.
Yeah.
But then he's reminded that the universe is pretty amazing. It's pretty freaking amazing. And
I know.
Who knows?
And that's when you see him talking to Deanna. He's had his faith restored. I mean, my God. Yeah. And people talk about, I mean, I think maybe it's because I'm older and more emotional, Bill. But to see where the writing from where Riker goes from the beginning of the episode to go, you know, we always talk about, well, these characters never change. And in Next Generation, they had to reset everything. Riker has gone through an enormous change in this episode.
Yeah, and this episode. And by the way, every single character has just a beautifully complete arc throughout the whole season.
So good. And this episode, I mean, Riker's like, we can't do it. He's like defeatist. And then Dr. Crusher says if Deanna were here, she would. And then Riker walks away, contemplates it, comes back and goes, you know, if we could open up the nacelles. Yeah. And that's what great character interplay is.
Yeah. Right. And by the way, if you watch that shot, he walks toward the bridge and the doors open and his crew gets up. They're out there. The bridge crew's out there waiting for him, waiting for that moment. Right. And he sees them. And then he turns around and he comes back and he says, you know, and it's, oh man, it's just the direction of this episode is so good.
It's so good.
This is one of the best episodes of Star Trek in such a long time. Everything just comes together beautifully. And as you said, this is the end of the first act of the season.
It is. I mean, it's the end of Act 1.
Yep.
And what's great is the next episode, and I'll say this, has one of my favorite interactions in Star Trek ever.
Yeah.
A conversation with two people that Todd Stashwick might have spoiled in this conversation. I didn't want to point it out, but he might have.
The next two episodes are so,
but they're very different. I mean, we
are.
And it but I've been waiting since 29 years to see the conversation I get in the next episode.
Yeah. Yep.
And it is a banger.
Yeah.
And again, shout out to Terry Metalis from a production standpoint, making great use of the 10 forward set. Even though the idea, what's great is the 10 forward set in Terry's mind is this is the bar that exists on Earth in the 24th and 25th century. Not some bar that existed in the 21st century.
And it's also not a recreation of 10 forward from Enterprise D from the Next Generation. It's a new space, but the way they use it is
so good. I mean,
throughout the whole season.
And here's the thing. One of the reasons that I hate modern Star Trek so much is because of the dunderheadedness of the people making it. And now if Terry's watching this, he's going to be like, oh my God, Rob, why do you have to say this?
Hate's a strong word. Right?
And I would call it what you want.
I know.
But when we go back to 21st century LA, and Guinan has a bar called 10 Forward, and they try and say that the name of the bar 10 Forward is a street address. Here's what really
it makes no sense at all.
Here's what really makes me upset. It means to me that someone never watched The Next Generation, and didn't understand that 10 Forward was deck 10 of the Enterprise D, and it was the furthest part on the ship. Right. That's why it was called 10 Forward. Yeah. And this retcon, here's the thing about it. It's not just that it's dumb. It's that it shows that everybody writing the show apparently didn't watch The Next Generation. Or maybe buy the blueprints that Rick Sternbach and Mike Ikuda put out.
And here's the thing, like I get it if there are new writers who didn't quite get that, but what's depressing is that there isn't somebody working on some of those other shows that would have said, well, wait a minute, you have to understand and respect the fact that that's something that has been established in the lore, right? Rather than just, oh well, we can just do it.
And here's I just want to be clear on this. I don't hate to hate. But when the people that are making the show are making these kinds of mistakes, it shows me that if they haven't paid attention to the very show that they're writing for.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating thing. And it's not that I dislike, and I don't mean to make it personal, but I'm like, I didn't ask you to do this. You guys did this to yourselves. And, Mike and Denise Ikuda could have stopped you from doing this. Gosh, and Drexler and the Ikudas, they worked on Picard season 3.
Yeah, and boy, you can tell that they went back to a lot of those people and brought them back, and you can see it. You can see it and you can feel it, and it really makes a difference. It just the authenticity of it.
I mean,
because that's the thing. It's not that like you said, it's not about just hating these shows. It's just that it feels like as someone who has loved this franchise and who's lived with it for so many years, it just feels like it's been changed into something that isn't what we recognize. And change is okay, but you have to at least respect what came before.
Well,
and I think that's kind of what feels like it's been missing.
Well, I think when you see that a 21st century bar is called 10 Forward, it's Guinan's bar, what that says, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand. It says that the people making the show don't understand the show.
Right.
And for us as viewers who have invested, my life into it, I now know that the people that they're given millions of dollars to make this entertainment that I am their frontline audience for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those people don't even know the show that they're making. So how am I supposed to? And this detail is, and not only is it wrong, they set it up to be like, hey, this is clever. We never understood why it's called 10 Forward.
Right.
And I'm like, why? Because you never ever watched the show. You never bought something.
Every single longtime fan of the show knows these little things, and it might seem like a little thing, but the problem is that's just one example of hundreds.
Yeah,
it's hundreds, and when you add all those up, then it feels like okay, you don't really know the show the way the audience does. You don't love it the way the audience does, and that's frustrating.
Well, if Bill, if you and I were up for a job to work on in any industry, say manufacturing or whatever, we might be given a test, pass a test, call it an SAT, call it whatever you want, to get to work on an IP. And what I find very interesting is the studios now, and this is the most frustrating thing about the modern entertainment age, the IPs are what they're making the most amount of money on. And
it's the core of their business.
The core of their business.
Massive IP franchise.
And they are hiring people based on a corporate spreadsheet. Like, these people did this and this and this and this.
Right.
They hired J.J. Abrams to make a Star Trek movie. And he goes on interview shows and saying, I don't like Star Trek.
I never got it. Right.
Never got it. That's
wasn't
the
really
guy.
My thing growing up, and it's like, oh, don't do that.
Don't hired do that. That's who you hire?
And here's the thing. You can, I get it. Like if you got this guy's really talented, he can bring something to it. Okay, maybe he's not familiar with it. But for example, as we've talked about, Nicholas Meyer didn't understand Star Trek. He wasn't a fan, but he took the time to understand.
To learn.
He took the time to learn and to put the effort in.
And also, he comes from an artistic literary family.
Right.
He was very highly educated. He was a novelist, a playwright. He made Time After Time. He'd written 7% Solution. He'd already done all this work. And I think what the real problem with a lot of these IPs is the hiring practices on these IPs is skewed. And unfortunately, the corporate interests, corporations, there's no way to define what makes a great storyteller.
Right.
Because it's ephemeral. You don't know what is it? How do you do it? We don't know.
Yeah.
And then you wind up getting fraudulent creation, which is unfortunate. And the funny thing about Terry Matalas is he made this his life's work. You know, if he never got to make another TV show, and by the way, you know, he did the new Escape from Witch Mountain pilot for Disney. Who knows where that's going to go? I don't know. I hope it's going to be good.
Oh, what? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's like, I loved those movies as a kid.
Dude.
That's really interesting.
I
really
know.
interesting.
I mean, the inverted helicopter and the flying Winnebago.
There's a whole world you can imagine behind those two stories.
I mean, Christopher Lee and Betty Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know they did the rock version of it, but yeah. So, but what's really interesting to me is that here's the thing. If I was the steward of the Trek franchise, which, you know, Alex Kurtzman is, and they keep talking about, you know, there's the Section 31 show that has never materialized. They ruined Section 31.
Yes.
In the second season of Discovery, the great thing about Section 31 is it was one dude. It was Sloan showing up, and you never really knew. And now Section 31 has membership cards.
In the Abrams films, it's like it's like a terrorist organization.
Well, what's so funny is there is a fundamental misunderstanding of Section 31 that started with Into Darkness that has gone on. Yes. And the season 2 of Discovery, one of the things that I'm watching this going, this is terrible. I mean, it's and what's frustrating is I'm like, when I'm looking at people that are getting paid a lot of money to write stuff, and I'm like, you guys, I want you to be great writers. But when did you watch? I get the feeling you never actually watched Sloan or any Section 31 episode of Deep Space Nine. You like went and had Chat GPT tell you what is Section 31. Here it is, and you didn't understand. Like, and let's give them a base and ships.
Go back to Enterprise, where you basically see the origins of what became Section 31. Right? It's like it's a pretty good idea to do a Section 31 show if you know how to approach it. If you know how to do it right.
I agree. But it's not a bad
idea at all.
They destroyed the whole idea of it.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, and they ripped off David Mack's Section 31 novel, which was called Section 31 Control. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, I have to go to another stream. I'm already late. They're probably wondering. They're like, where are you?
You spend your entire life on YouTube. I'm amazed. How does your voice? You must have a bionic voice box.
I don't know. I mean, some people said it's getting a little scratchy. I try. By the way,
this has been a blast this week. This is a great episode. This is my favorite episode of this season so far, and it's been a blast to talk about it. And how cool to have Todd come on and
oh my God, Bill. You know, I would say this. I mean, it's because you and I create the environment that invites. We invite anybody involved with Star Trek. I'd love to get Drexler or Mike and Denise Akuda. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for people that have been involved with Star Trek for a while to come on the show because I have been such a polarizing force, which I understand. I get it, Axnar and all that. Yeah. I would hope that people would watch these shows and see that they're erudite enough that, hey, anybody can come on the show. We will celebrate your work and all of that. And Todd Stashwick, what a guy. I mean, that guy, I love that guy. I feel I should get it. I don't know if I can afford him now, but you know, we should make another movie and just write something for him and make it. Before I'm done, the Tweaky Kid says, aside from revisiting the Next Generation Crew's films, these Picard episodes so far inspired me to get a collar for my dog with the Starfleet Delta Shield. The four-legged number 1 was my favorite part of season 1. It's true. Where's Picard's dog? He should have brought him with him like Gene Hackman in Crimson Tide. Remember that? Come on, man.
Yes.
Be fantastic. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, remember last week I asked you if there was a Blu-ray set of Columbo? Guess what? Kino Lorber comes through today. I saw that.
Yeah, they just announced.
Columbo
that, yeah.
Blu-ray soon in Japan. It's $200. And then 200 Watt Studio goes on to say, how a showrunner does not know that 10 Forward was pivotal to several episodes of TNG. Yesterday's Enterprise, best of both worlds, even PICARD season 1. I think they knew it was pivotal. They just didn't know why it was called 10 Forward.
Right.
There was, and that's.
And by the way, that's low hanging fruit. If you have someone like the Ikudas on hand to say, oh, here's why.
Well,
like,
and they don't.
It's easy.
And they don't think about it. Look, the whole idea, then they turned Guinan into, they tried to make it a racial thing. Like, do you know how my people, I'm like, you're an alien. You're an Allurian. I understand. Right. It's, I don't think did they not watch Time's Arrow? They didn't.
Or Generations, for that matter.
Yeah, it's, and the thing is, that's what we as fans get upset about. When we watch these shows and it's clear that the people making them, even the most, the simplest understanding of these very basic facts, they don't know them.
Yeah.
And and they actually tried to change the lore and say that 10 Forward was an address in the 21st century. And that's why Guinan named her bar 10 Forward.
Yeah.
No, that was already on the Enterprise. It was called 10 Forward, and it was an actual name of a deck on the ship.
Yeah.
And that's why people get mad.
Among the many other
I mean, but when you have I have to say, if you're going to work in an IP like Star Trek that has 50 plus years of technical manuals,
know it and love it and understand it.
Yeah.
Period.
And
it's not hard. It's not hard.
No. And if you don't, these kinds of mistakes, by the way, these are mistakes they put front and center. It's like Mrs. Malaprop. They're Star Trek Malaprop-isms. I mean, they're so egregious that I find them to be offensive. I'm like, and then I ask myself, why did these writers and the people they hire do this? Did somebody not go, hey?
No, because I think they honestly don't know that they're doing it.
But that's the worst part. They don't know.
Right. They don't know. And then and then it's, if you're a longtime fan, it's really frustrating. If you're a new fan, it's like, oh wow, look at this glossy, cool show. But like, if you're a longtime fan, it just kind of makes your head shake, and then you just wonder, like, why do I still care? And then you see something like season 3 of Picard, and you remember why.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because the idea that Guinan would go start a bar after she was on the Enterprise D and name it 10 Forward. There's a series of Star Trek novels about a bar in San Francisco, a Starfleet bar. And
the 602 Club, right?
Yeah. And
which, by the way, comes from Rick Berman, who went to the University of Wisconsin, where I went, and there was actually a 602 Club there at the University of Wisconsin. And that's the genesis of that.
Yeah, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, Bill, this has been, we've only done 3 of these together, but this is clearly our best episode. I want to thank you for, and will you come back next week?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Next week is a banger of an episode, even though Todd Stashwick might have inadvertently used someone's name and spoiled something. I'm not going to say what that is.
Just don't go scan back and,
Yeah, whatever. I have to put it up because Terry's like,
honestly,
God damn it, Stashwick.
They're all banger episodes.
They are
forward. I mean, they've all got their degree of, awe.
Oh, every single one.
Yeah.
And what I do like is how the tone does change. The tone now becomes like, okay, now the plot thickens literally in episode 5.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Well, this was a blast, man. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for being here. What a terrific episode. My God, it's 10:30. I mean, apparently we can't do short shows.
No, but, that's all right.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to go on to the Zod Riders cast. I mean, he's probably wondering where the hell I am.
Talk for another 4 hours.
I know. But
it's going to be 3 in the morning, and I'm going to look on the computer, and there you are going to be still talking.
Well, listen, this has been great, and thank you to all of you who are here watching the KURLAN NAISKOS, a Picard Season 3 after show. We'll be back next week with episode 5, which is where do they go from here? We know the changelings are out there. What's going on? We shall see. So, Bill, I bid you good night.